Welcome, everybody. We're already in session. We had closed session for this meeting. I apologize, we're running a little bit behind. We're going to begin this meeting with a budget hearing. So I need to call that meeting to order and ask Allison for a roll call.
Prentice.
Here.
Lyon.
Here.
Phelps.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
Trippy.
Here.
Westham. Here. Fletcher.
And we're going to start with Ms. Hale.
Okay, all right. So we're gonna start tonight with just a short presentation on our budget. Thankfully this year, our budget looks a little different than it does last year, thanks to our COVID relief money and some of the federal assistance that we've been receiving. To review the assumptions for FY22, this year we're looking at having our ESSER 3 funds, 1/3 of the 20% required learning loss allocation set aside is in this year's revenue projections, along with 80% of the other ESSER 3 funds that we are looking at for this fiscal year. We do not have our final pre-K numbers at this point, but we did put in our tentative funding, which is the same as FY21. We've budgeted our facility sales tax to the same level as FY21, and that has a breakdown of $1.5 million going into Fund 30 to pay for our alternate revenue bonds, and then $1.3 million in Fund 60 for construction. Our CPPRT is estimated at $2.2 million. We did increase CPPRT by 4%, but the municipal league is actually saying they believe CPPRT is going to go up 16% this year. But we're being very conservative by budgeting a 4% increase, but that would be wonderful if those actual revenues do come in at 16% of an
Can you
increase.
remind me what that stands for again, please?
Corporate personal property replacement tax. And then all of our state and federal grant payments, we budgeted 4 payments. We did receive all of our payments last year, so we're anticipating that we will receive all of our payments this year. And we are budgeting the same for federal and state lunch reimbursement as in FY21. If we look at the chart up here, we're gonna be comparing our FY21 amended revenue and expenses with our FY22 budget. There's a lot of numbers up here, but I think if we just look at the final 2 columns on the right, in our ed fund, we were looking at an amended budget last year of a deficit of 1.1. When I say deficit, that doesn't mean from our fund balance, but revenue over expenses. This year, we're looking at a surplus of approximately $8.1 million in the ed fund. This is entirely due to our ESSER 3 funds. So some of these funds will be earmarked, but that is where that large amount of surplus is coming from. Our O&M, which is operations and maintenance, we're looking at a $98,000 deficit for this year, but once again, that's not our fund balance, this is just expense over revenue. Debt service, we're looking at $459,000 approximately in surplus. Transportation, we're looking at a $945,000 deficit. Transportation was really interesting this year with our claim. Our claim was down because we didn't transport students for a large portion of the year. So we do get quite a bit of our revenue for the next fiscal year from the prior fiscal year's payment. So that is why there's such a difference in transportation for this year. IMRF, that's a strategic spend down on the $734,701 deficit. Remember, we can't transfer those funds to any other fund, so we want to make sure that we keep that as close to zero with having a little bit of a cushion as we can. So we did do a strategic spend down on that. Capital projects, that's just a little misleading. We're obviously not deficit spending, but that's part of the monies that we have in there to finish our projects. Working cash, $600 additional money. We really haven't done anything with working cash. We are asking tonight to do a transfer from working cash into Fund 60 construction. That's something that was planned in the original budget 2.5 years ago. We've just never actually made that transfer. We had enough money in Fund 60, so we're just doing that at this point. Tort, once again, a strategic spend down of $343,000 in the deficit there. And our fire prevention and safety, $899,000. And that should, in essence, clear out our fire prevention and safety, which we spent all of our funds on construction from that. If we're looking at the ed fund, FY22 versus FY21 budget, ed fund is where the majority of our expenditures come from in terms of salaries, benefits, supplies, and materials. Last year in salaries, we spent $27.8 million. This year, we're estimating spending $29.4. This is a reflection of our new contracts, some of our increased pay for our collective bargaining units across the district, so that accounts for those. We also have additional positions that we funded this year that we're funding through the ESSER 3 monies, additional SEO supports, and outreach positions. Employee benefits went up about $100,000. Purchase services actually went down from $3.3 million to $2.8 million. Supplies and materials, that went down significantly last year, the $8.3 million. That was reflective of like our digital equity grant. A lot of those purchases that we made for Chromebooks from the ESSER 1, ESSER 2 digital equity. So that's why there's such a large difference from FY21 to FY22. Capital outlay, once again, that's been reduced. We are, not spending as much money on our construction and follow-up items. Other objects, about $400,000 more from 1.1 to 1.5. Our non-capitalized equipment, just about a $20,000 difference there. Nothing for termination benefits. So our total expenses in FY21 for the ed fund were $44.7 million, and this year we're anticipating $38.7. Once again, what can account for that is mostly the technology that we purchased to respond to COVID. If we're looking at our board policy goals, the board has 2 financial goals that are in board policy, and progress towards those goals have been excellent with some of our federal money that we've received in the last couple of years. So our first one is operating with 180 days cash on hand. And in the ed fund, and we just look at our operating funds, which are education, operations and maintenance, and transportation, we are projecting a $37.6 million ed fund balance at the end of this year. Our working cash, 180 days on hand, would be $19.1 million. So right now, with what we're estimating, we have 354 days of cash on hand, which is excellent. Operations and maintenance, we're looking at a projected fund balance of $2.8 million. 180 days of cash on hand is $984,000, so that makes 518 days of cash on hand for O&M. And transportation, projected fund balance of $2.7 million, and 180 days of cash on hand is 1.2, so we have 402 days of cash on hand. Now, with that being said, just a couple things. Within the education fund, because all of the ESSER 3 money needed to first go into education fund, there are some additional projects that Building and Grounds Committee has identified that we need to do that were not part of initial construction, like resurfacing of the teacher's parking lot in the back of GHS and some other things. We needed to replace casework that was never replaced in the 2011 renovations at Steele. So these are going to be summer 22 projects, and some of this balance will go to fund those projects to create equitable situations in all of our buildings across the district. So that is a large number, but a lot of it is earmarked for projects. Okay, and the next financial goal in 5:10 is operating with revenue to fund balance ratios of 2 to 1. The board has met all of these goals, so our projected revenue for FY22 is $46.9 million. The projected fund balance, once again, is $37.7 million. And so the fund balance goal is based on $23.4 million. So the board has met that goal for education fund, operations and maintenance. The projected fund balance is $2.8 million, the projected revenue is $1.8, and so that goal balance would be $949,000. We've met that goal. And in transportation, the projected revenue is $1.5 million. The projected fund balance is $2.7 million. And in order to meet that goal, the board would have needed $762,000, and so that is what we want. Does anyone have any questions initially from just a review of the numbers?
That recognition piece we hear about occasionally on the fund balances, on a financial status, how will that reflect those numbers or whatever we hear about?
For our financial profile score?
Yes.
So our financial profile score we will not be a 5, which is hard to believe, but that is because of our long-term debt. So our long-term debt is something that we need to address once the construction projects are over. We need to look at refinancing, see if we can possibly pay down that debt sooner. So as we pay down that debt, the financial profile score will increase to, at this rate, if our fund balances remain healthy, to a 5. But until that number drops, some of our long-term debt, we won't achieve a 5, but we will be in excellent condition in our AFR for that profile score. And we are looking at, in fact, Dr. Esplin and I have a meeting in October about potentially looking at refinancing some of our debt so that we could get that paid off earlier. The other thing that our fund balances are going to hopefully potentially allow us to do next year after we finish construction projects is look at potentially lowering the tax rate. So with having those fund balances and that many days of cash on hand, we would like to look to see if we could then adjust and reduce the tax rate at that time as well. So.
I don't think I heard you right, what did you say?
So next year, after our construction projects are done, we hope to recommend to the board to lower the tax rate. With our fund balances, we should be able to do that.
No, that's incredible. It doesn't happen very often.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Does
We're
anyone
putting on
else?
the agenda today some significant curricular initiatives, goals, which may need additional resources, so don't hold your breath. All right.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
I will say in fairness to that, and we'll get to that discussion, but I believe the board has put forth the resources to work towards those goals. So it is still our belief that we can very stridently work towards lowering the property tax rate in the near future.
One more question, Jen. Remind me about the timeline for our rating.
Timeline for
Or
our,
when do we get
for
a
the
new one?
AFR.
Yes,
Next month, we will have the AFR presented by our auditor
okay,
and we'll know our financial profile for that time.
at that time. Is the state's increased profile gonna help us at all?
Unfortunately, no, it may help us when we refinance, our debts, which we hope to do. So that should hopefully help from that perspective, but it won't help in our financial profile score.
Well, excellent, thank you so much.
For the ADC as well.
Okay. Is that also?
And that is Mr. Houston.
Mr. Houston?
Oh, let's see. Okay. Okay, great. I believe you've all received the packet for the JVC budget. You know, since I proposed it, there's not been a lot of changes to that. We've had a couple salary adjustments due to a resignation and a hire, so not too much change in that. The good news is that our funding has stayed the same, and so with our grants, that stayed the same. The bad news is that our enrollment is down a little bit, but we believe that's due to COVID. And so we are going to use some of our monies as far as we've been working with Ken Springer on a recruitment campaign for students and for our other area schools as well. So we ended up with a beginning balance of about 600. Let me get my glasses on. That's awful small print. I'm sorry. We started with a beginning balance of $698,000. As I said, the tuition revenue this year was about $438,000. Like I said, the grant money is about $141,000, and so about $579,000 total. But as we looked at some of our expenditures, our salaries, as Ms. Ham indicated, that our salaries jumped, and so we had to we had to adjust our budget for those. The support services, that's a very large number, but that is due to the construction of our vocational center. So as we've thought about the work that need to be done, whether it be electrical and some of the other things, that's some of the money that's come out of that. We think that that's probably a one-time thing, so next year that number we hope will decrease, of course, because the space will be outfitted. And then the payments, the other payment is for the dual credit classes that we pay out for Carl Sandburg College. And so the expenditures are a lot more. They're about $976,000, but because of the surplus we've got sitting there, we're still $397,000 ahead. So we've been trying to save for a rainy day, and that rainy day's happened. And we're excited about the center, as I said, and we think that phase 2 will step in now where we don't really have to build the center. We can actually just go into replacing equipment, looking at more certifications for kids and software. So phase 2 will come in behind it. Any questions? All right, we are planning a ribbon cutting ceremony for the center, and you'll all be invited for that. We need to clear with Dr. Aspen's schedule, make sure you can make it. So once we do that, you guys will get the invite. Okay?
Hopefully a lot of the community members will attend it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell you that everybody's that come through has been very impressed with the work that's been done there, and the center is really starting to take shape, and so we're excited about that. And I walked through the culinary class today, and oh my goodness, you guys can't wait. I can't wait to show that to you guys. I mean, some of you've seen it before, but the end product's gonna be phenomenal, so.
I look forward to seeing it in action.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody in the community have any questions concerning the budgets for 205 or for the GABC? Yes.
In the budget report that Ms. Pam, I believe it is, the ESSER 3 funds, is that COVID funds from the state, is that correct?
It's from the federal government, yeah.
Federal government.
It's the American Recovery Act.
Okay, and those funds are currently being used in different areas in the budget, is that correct?
All of it is going into the ed fund at this point, and then when it's determined what we're going to use those funds for, then we may make transfers, but right now the revenue is housed in the education fund.
Oh, okay.
So we always have to amend the budget each year,
Yeah.
just because of the large amount of revenue and expenditures.
Mhm.
So that'll be adjusted then in the spring when we do the budget amendment.
Okay, and then I have one more question if I'm permitted. You referred to the long-term debt, a couple of times. Can you give us an idea of how much that long-term debt is?
I don't know.
If I understood correctly, you're gonna try to refinance that in a short period of time, is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again.
You were gonna try to refinance it to pay it off?
Some of it is not callable, some of our bonds are not callable, which
Mhm.
means that they're not eligible to be refinanced at this time.
Yeah.
We do have a few from the 2011, bonds, 2011, 2012 through 2014, that are coming callable in the next year or two, that we could refinance at that point. So those are the ones that we're looking at, and I would have to get you the exact number. Sorry,
Okay.
I don't have that in front of me.
Can you give me like a general idea, maybe, $1, 2, $3 million, whatever?
I mean,
I believe it.
I believe it's in the magnitude of 63 million.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Is there any additional public questions? Okay, seeing none, motion to close this hearing?
So moved.
Can we do a voice vote, Allison?
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And moving on, I'm gonna call the regular meeting to order.
Phelps?
Yes.
Rodriguez? Aye. Trippy?
Aye.
Muscat? Aye. Fuentes? Lyon?
And let's move on to a roll call, even though we just did a vote.
Rodriguez?
She did
Is that good
Here,
enough?
was that the roll call? He's confused. Okay.
Yeah. We usually don't have a budget hearing, it kind of put me out of order here. And at this moment, can we all stand for a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance
To
the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on to the recognition of public comments. This is a time when visitors may request to address the Board of Education on any item germane to the role and function of the Board of Education. When the board president, so speaking, so directs, the person should stand, give their name, and begin statements. Persons are asked to refrain from making any personal comments regarding any individual. The board president reserves the right to limit presentations to 5 minutes. Let's see. We have several people who would like to address us. The podium is up there with a microphone, and Allison has given us a timer so we know when 5 minutes is, because we do have several people. The first speaker is Ms. Nicole Kistler. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, Superintendent, board members, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight, and I have some concerns, and I do own part of that responsibility, just kind of because something had occurred last week with the volleyball team, so now this has been aware to me. And I know I emailed the board already my statement, and so I just wanted you to have that so you were aware of what happened. You know, when we all got the mask mandate, that everybody's masking, I guess like I said, I'm owning the part of being a little naive and thinking that things would change a little bit with our children as well. When we got that call that, you know, they were asking if the girls still wanted to play, I was really hoping that they could still play. It wasn't said that they were checking necessarily because of a reason, or because they couldn't play if they weren't vaccinated, and so, again, this is all STEM, so I'm doing a lot of research, and I'm doing a lot of looking and trying to figure out what's what. And so, of course, you can understand that my daughter was very upset by this, of course. And sports are not everything, but school's another story. And we all here want our kids in person learning. And that's for you guys. I know you guys want it. I know we want it. I know those teachers want it. I know the principals want it. What I'm frustrated about is our next call was from the Knox County Health Department, which, you know, then gave us instructions. And upon those instructions, one of the parents took it a little further to do their test and bring it into the nurse. And on that, then we were told they couldn't be 6 feet apart with a mask on and play volleyball. So we couldn't go back for the 14 days, or until the 14 days were over. So we couldn't go back on that 10th day because there have to be 6 feet apart for 14 days. And by them not doing that at volleyball practice, they couldn't go back or couldn't play. In saying that, I just don't feel like it makes much sense for our kids. You know, they're giving us these rules. Our student athletes have no symptoms, no signs of COVID, and they were playing all summer long together in mass. They were playing this year already in regular season. We all have the same notifications or the same knowledge about, you know, being able to spread it, being able to get it. That's why we're having a mask mandate for everybody right now. I really want to call to the attention, of our board and of our parents and the teachers that, you know, the IDPH and the CDC, they're putting forth a guideline that makes it so unvaccinated kids have to be quarantined and vaccinated kids can stay in school. And I realize that it's not necessarily your guideline when you're saying, I gotta report this to the health department, I gotta report this to the health department. but it makes it our problem, because then those kids are home and not learning in person. I feel like we all owe it to ourselves, and we all owe it to these kids to work as hard as we can to keep them in the classroom. And I know there's new document out today in the email, I get it, but it's still in there, and it's still going to be, and I've been reading the thing that the health department gave me. But the only thing it says is that vaccinated kids can stay in school and do as long as they're fine, but it does not, if that name goes there and they check and see if that student in the database is vaccinated or unvaccinated, then they're gonna call that parent and say, you cannot be in school 14 days if you are a close contact. I just find that very hard and very hard to swallow. I feel like they're using that as leverage, and it's not the leverage that I would like, it's not the leverage that a lot of people would like. You can't separate kids and expect parents to feel educated about why they should be vaccinated. That's not a very good approach at all. It makes it very hard for us as parents. I went, asked my husband, I've been reading this weekend. I'm trying to make a very good decision for my child and for my children. And I want to make a good decision. I don't want to be pressured into a good decision. And maybe somebody needs to do some extra education for me, because maybe I haven't found it yet. Maybe that's not it, but I don't want these kids to be home. My oldest just graduated from high school, and he had a rough last year and a half, for sure. And he struggled being at home on a computer, and struggled. And he's a very good student. In person, he is very accountable. In person, he participates, he raises his hand to ask any teacher. But at home, he was very distracted. My other two kids that are in high school right now, they are gonna have no problem. But that's kids. Everybody is different. And I know there are a lot of kids out there that this is not gonna be good for. If you have the means, write the IDPH, right? We need to find a better way, keep them there every day. So that's what I have to say. That's what I really want you to hear. I'm willing to help. I'm not here just to say this. I want it to be for these kids, for all the kids in my community to be there. So, thank you.
Ms. Kistler, thank you for your comments.
Welcome.
The next speaker is Ms. Jennifer Zolper-Peck.
Good evening. Thank you everyone for having myself and to essentially advocate for our daughters and to help communicate our concerns regarding how the last week events were handled. I wanted to touch on 3 points. The first point I think really has been addressed.
Can you check, make sure your microphone's on?
Yeah.
I want to make sure everybody can hear what you're
Is
saying.
that on?
No.
I can hear it.
Is it on?
Oh, there you go.
It's on.
I just want to make sure everybody can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, very good. So, thank you for having me this evening. My name is Jennifer Peck, and the intent of myself and Nicole being here this evening is really to be an advocate for our daughters and for unvaccinated children within our school district. There's 3 points that I want to touch on. The first one was the lack of process and communication that occurred over the past week when the COVID test and the positive cases began occurring at all 3 levels of the volleyball team. There was obvious disconnects in the communication. I have 2 daughters, one a freshman and one a sophomore. I received different communication from both of them from the health department regarding what the guidelines were. So, we don't need to stay on that for too terribly long. I did send an email to each of the board members after asking them this morning, outlining some of those events. So the responses that I've received thus far, I feel like is adequate, knowing that there is going to be reasonable action put into play to help mitigate and close the gaps that occurred over the past week. The 2 most important items that I want to touch on, the second one is really advocating for unvaccinated children. The third one, imploring each each of you to be advocates for unvaccinated children at the state level. That's where this is going to change. It's not going to change at this level unless we advocate at the state level that the guidelines that are put into play right now are not acceptable and conducive to creating an equal learning environment for all children. Unvaccinated children are going to continue going to school in the district regardless of the efforts and the encouragement to vaccinate children. That is an independent decision that the parents will make and will continue to make. We cannot punish unvaccinated children by pulling them out of their learning environment and their extracurricular environment for a 2-week period. There has to be a different solution to the current guideline that's in play. I understand that based on some of the feedback that I received today, that there will be a return to test policy or program that's being implemented in October. That's encouraging to know that there will be some ability to return healthy children to activities sooner than a 14-day period. But today, the guidelines are discriminatory against unvaccinated children. It does not give them a level playing ground to learn in an environment if they were in school today in person learning. It does not give them a level playing ground to learn in the same manner that their vaccinated peers would, and it does not allow them to learn in extracurricular activities at the same level that their vaccinated peers are allowed to do. That, in my definition, is discriminatory behavior. So, I'm here to advocate for those unvaccinated children, and again, implore each of you to advocate at the state level that the guidelines that are currently in place as the IDP guidelines coming down from CDC is not acceptable. And there needs to be an alternative solution to what we put into play for the school, for the children in our school district. So am I over time? 1 minute. Okay. That was a mouthful, came out very quickly. But I again, thank you for taking Nicole and I's considerations this evening. There were other parents who also have similar sentiment as each of us, and that's just on the volleyball team. I'm sure if there was going to be a poll with all the other sports teams and extracurriculars, there would be many more parents who feel the same that we do that. The agenda of forcing vaccination cannot be utilized in this manner on children and on minors. We have the right to determine whether or not our children are vaccinated or not, and for those that are not going to be vaccinated, they have the right to continue in an education environment and an extracurricular environment that does not negatively impact them. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for your comments, appreciate it. Next speaker is Mrs. Deb Marty.
Good evening. Because I wear glasses, every time I put my glasses on, they fog up. So I'm gonna pull this down just a bit so that I can actually read, okay? I actually have a couple of questions for the board. And they relate back to last month when we were here questioning the mask mandate and that type of information that was being spread around then. Can any of you tell me what the enrollment is right now for GHS? Do we know what that number is?
It's in the report.
Well, I'm sorry,
Approximately 1,200 students.
1,200? Okay,
That's an approximate, I'd have to look at the
that's
report.
fine, that's fine, I appreciate that. Out of that 1,200, do you have a COVID update? How many students have actually been contracted with COVID, tested positive with COVID? No?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Are they doing contact tracing on students that way?
Yes.
And when the Delta variant subsides, is the board willing to reconsider their mask mandate policy? No. Why, sir?
At this point, we're following the governor's mandate, so that's really the direction of, giving the direction to the board.
And the board is aware that a mandate is not a law, correct?
There's certainly repercussions, and the board has agreed to follow the governor's mandate.
So if, when the Delta variant subsides, they wane and it's a up and down type of thing. So unless Governor Pritzker changes his mandate, the board is not willing to look at that. Is that correct?
Just speaking for myself, I would probably say no. There are 7 other board members, or 6 other board members.
And then, in the minutes that were provided on the web today, there's 7 pages of documentation here, plus the budget numbers were actually put on there. Is there any possibility when, you actually, put in here about people that, that address the board, the public that addresses the board, if we can, with their names, put in there what they were concerned about? We had 11 people last
If I
month.
can interject on that, the entire board meeting is being recorded and the meeting is being posted on YouTube. So if people want to follow up and.
What about people that don't do YouTube? A lot of elderly people and grandparents don't do that. They just don't.
You know, I can't, they're welcome to come to the meetings, I guess.
So the answer is no there, right? Correct?
That'd be correct.
Okay. All right. Let's see, there was one other thing in the minutes. I asked the other 2 questions earlier, so, I'd just like to reiterate that, parents and grandparents are very concerned about the mask mandate. Students are struggling horribly outside of school, not wanting to go to school because they have to sit behind a plastic, basically little jail cell, and then have masks on. It's really difficult to see students struggle like that they are sad, they don't want to go to school, they struggle with grades, and we all know about the suicide rates and the dropout rates. And I'm wondering, if the enrollment is down this year compared to last year, which I don't know, all over District 205, I don't know. But I just want you to recognize that there are many, many, many people, more people that don't want masks than do want masks. And we're fighting at the government level, at the gubernatorial level, to try to get this changed, and we're not gonna stop. We'll be here every month to ask questions about the COVID and the mask mandates, and to see, and please don't shake your head no, we will be here, because we're very concerned about our children. And it's really scary what's happening to them. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker is Ms. Nina Smith.
My name is Lana Smith, and I have one.
My apologies.
What?
My apologies for mispronouncing your name.
Oh, that's okay, no problem. I have a question about the Northwoods Church, which is now the Ascent Church. I was just wondering, I haven't seen anything in the paper about an update about what's going on with the district in regard to moving into that, or when the construction is going to start. Have they started the architecture plans or anything like that? I'm just curious about that.
Again, normally this isn't a question answer thing, but I will let you know that that is on the agenda. There'll be discussion in the building and grounds report tonight. An update, yes.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Patrick Kistler.
I'm gonna take it fast. Thank you.
Understood. And our final speaker of the evening is Mr. Jim Jacobs.
Thank you for having me. I want to commend the board and all of the district for the open house that you had a couple weeks ago. I was just stunned at how beautiful Lombard is. I like the configuration. When I went there, back when the books were chipped in stone, it was a very dark place and kind of dismal. And it's just beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. And you maintain, at least in a sense, a historic structure. The main part of that, I think, was built by the WPA. Now, King, I was really impressed. I should say Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School, I was really impressed with the fact that you put so much emphasis on Dr. King. And I really appreciate that. I want to talk a little bit about Nielsen. I had mentioned to the board before about the memorial stones that are there. I was there a few months ago, and a former student of mine, Tommy Meade, pulled up in the truck and asked the custodian if he could go back and did his grandson's memorial, Ryan Maxwell, who was mauled and killed by the pit bull back in 2013. And I hope that the district is sensitive to that, to those memorials that are there. I know they're not gravestones, there's no one buried there that I know of. And so I do think that people should be contacted and asked if they want to have those stones. Also, I don't know where you stand on the auction for Nielsen, but I reference Member Lyon, who said in the paper that we got $300-some thousand 15 years ago or so for Allen Park when we sold that. And I hope that that building and that ground should be much more valuable than that. And I hope you don't take peanuts on it. Churchill, I would say about Churchill that I think should there be some miracle that the leadership of the community gets a vision and we grow in population and you may need that building, I would hope that you would mothball it and just hold it for a few years before you did anything drastic with it. Now that we have beautiful buildings, I think we have to be laser focused on the essence of education, which is what our youngsters, our young people, our students learn. And I've been talking with Wendell Hunnigan, a former board member who's a good friend of mine. And I found if you want to know how well a district is doing in terms of curriculum and instruction, you look at the performance of the students of color, and particularly the African American students. And the figures that Mr. Hunnigan quoted to me were abysmal. And there are black children, brown children, all children can learn. And as a taxpayer, I expect that. And finally, looking at my list here, I will say I do commend we've had some comments about the masks. I commend the board for complying with the governor's mask mandate. I support that mandate, and I respect the differing opinion, but you have no authority really to override that mandate and not suffer some real repercussions. And I believe that it is within the, until there's a legislation, it's within the preference of the governor to impose that mandate. And thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
And thank you, Mr. Jacobs, appreciate your comments. Let's see, moving on. Anyone have any presentations? Okay, next on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, will you vote?
Rodriguez? Aye. Kirby?
Aye.
Hernandez?
Aye.
Escam? Aye. Lyon? Phelps?
Aye.
Next on the agenda is focus area 1, relevant skills that lead to employability. First is the curriculum report. Ms. Spring.
You have my report in front of you. Are there any questions related to what I've outlined?
Doesn't appear so.
I would like to highlight that we have 2 members joining me to present on the science of reading because of our work in the reading and the science of reading here in District 205. We'll present in Chicago at the Leadership Summit. Just highlighting that initial rollout of that work.
Excellent, it's good to hear.
Thank you.
Next on focus area 1 is the special education report.
Good evening. You have my report in front of you. One change to highlight to this is we now have 6 paraprofessional openings as we have more resignations coming in at this point in time. And just to note that our move-outs and move-ins for special ed has increased dramatically too over the last week since my report.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for him?
Yeah, I have a question. When I first got this and I saw we lost 6 positions, I went into lockup thinking we'd lost teachers, but these are paraprofessionals. So my question to you is, you were fully staffed and now you're down 6. Is that going to put you in a situation that, for your department?
Yes. When you add the 6 open positions, the lack of substitutes that are available, and the number of staff that we have out ill or dealing with situations, we have staffing problems in Steel, Silas, other 2 main ones right now. King, we're short a 101 position. She's trying to cover that position in the interim of trying to fill it again. But yes, it is creating some issues. And we currently have some teachers that are going out, so that also is becoming an impact.
Seeing no additional questions, I'll move on to building reports. Everybody's received those and read them. Do we have any questions? Okay. Seeing no questions, move on to the enrollment and registration report.
You see that in front of you there. We did, as you see the comparison, our enrollment is down from last year, which continues the trend that we've had for a number of years. And there's one box on that enrollment report on the compared to the current, that's a mistake. So if you look at 6-day comparison from last year to this year, we're down, I believe it's 71 students. But if you look at a longer term, this morning we took a longer, deeper view into that. Since 2018, in the elementary, so the cohort survival ratio, if you look at like the kindergartners back then who are 4th graders now, we're losing somewhere between 1 to 5% of those students a year now, again. And so we keep a pretty strict track of where those students go. The vast majority of those students are going out of state, so they're moving away. They're not moving to Camp, they're not moving to Kewanee, they're not moving to Knoxville. They're moving to Tennessee, and Florida, and Texas. They're moving out of Illinois, and it's getting to be obviously a bigger concern, and that it doesn't seem to slow down. There was a time there right before the pandemic hit that we started to see a little bit of a trickle down. It was really slowing, but since COVID, since March of 2020, it's really started to accelerate again. So, it's something we're gonna have to keep a constant eye on, and we're very lucky that we have somebody as capable and talented as Tammy Folger doing a lot of the record keeping for us, and she's very diligent about asking people where they're moving, why they're moving. And while I don't have those exact numbers in front of me, I can tell you from many conversations with her, the vast majority of the answers are there's work in other states, there's opportunity in other states, and so they're moving out of state. And so obviously that's something that we want to correct, do our part. But our enrollment continues to slide, especially in the middle elementary grades. It's really gotten down to where some of those classes started at 317 and are down into the 260s. Those are starting to become concerning numbers, obviously.
Any questions concerning enrollment? I know personally, having looked at past enrollment reports, it's been a downward trend for at least 12 years, if not more. And I know when we asked you to do that, I believe a few years ago, to basically exit interviews, try to find out where they're going.
Yeah, we started that 3 years ago, and it's been helpful.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was gonna say it's not even 40. It's more like 60. We've had a negative trend here for going quickly the last 40 years. But the peak was somewhere in the 70s, although that was because the high school population was so much bigger. You really started to see 1980, 81, it really picked up, and then it's just continued since then. This part of the country is hollowed out. There have been a lot more people moving away.
Nice here though.
Let's see. Okay, well, seeing no more questions, we'll move on. The next item is board goals. Yeah, let's have a motion to, everybody's seen the board goals on the agenda. Can we get a motion
I
to,
move to accept them as solution board.
I'll second.
okay, and conversation?
Thank you. So, for those of you in the audience and listening out in Zoom world, the board had a retreat a month ago, and the only items we discussed were potential goals for this year and future years. As Mr. Jacobs said very well, we have nice buildings, and now we need to focus on the important work, which we've been focusing on, but now we can turn more of our attention to that. The board put in a lot of work on their own individually and then as a group. We had some email exchanges back and forth, got some feedback based on the initial responses from the board. And so you see the 4 goals you have before you. We had said we were going to try to get it to 3, but we really couldn't parse out any one of those 4. And so you see some very ambitious goals that the board is hoping to approve tonight. I'm not looking at them in front of me right now, but if you just want to quote them, I was going to say, we can put them on the screen. I'm happy to read them, or Rod, you can do it.
I can read them for everybody. It's kind of long, but I'll read it to you. The first goal, the ultimate district goal is to eliminate chronic absenteeism and truancy. Therefore, the district will create interim goals to achieve this ultimate goal by the end of 2024-25 school year. By the end of the 2022 school year, the rate of chronic absenteeism truancy will be no greater than 8% of the entire student population. By the end of 2023-2024 school year, the rate of chronic absenteeism truancy will be no greater than 4% of the entire student population. Personally, for me, that's a real important one. We can't teach them anything if the kids don't show up in school. And if you look at the Illinois school report card, kids need to show up. Anybody can look at Illinois report card, schoolreportcard.com, and look up our school, it's there.
Well, and I would like to add on that, so if anybody does look that up, the state changed its method for how they characterize what a truant student is into 2019, I believe was the number, 2018 maybe. It used to be that you had to have 10% of the year or more out, and now it's 10 absences or more, whether they're excused or not. So it's still a lot of absences. I mean, having 10 days out is a lot. And so right now our chronic absenteeism rate has really gotten high, even taking COVID out of it. And so we have wonderful, and I mean wonderful outreach workers who do great work and go out and work to try to bring kids in every day. And we feel like this is the time when we need to state that this is a really important goal, because we have a number of students who just don't come to school. And when our outreach workers go to the homes, they're in many cases abused by family members who are not greeting them warmly. And yet these saints of human beings still continue to go back and go to those houses and work with those families as much as possible. And there's a level of hostility that they should never have to put up with for a second, yet they do it every day. And so it is not from lack of effort on the part of the outreach workers. We're just going to need to see more of a community effort to try to get more kids back to school. Because having one child chronically truant is bad. Right now we have a lot more than one.
Thank you. The next goal number 2, the ultimate goal, district goal, is for all students to be performing at or above state standards in all areas and all grades. Therefore, the district will create interim goals to achieve this ultimate goal by the end of 2026-2027 school year. By the end of the 2021-22 school year, no less than 30% of all students in all grades and all subgroups will meet or exceed state standards as measured by the IAR assessment and SAT assessment in reading and mathematics. Moving on to goal number 3. The ultimate district goal is for all students to be successfully complete Algebra 1 by the end of 8th grade. Therefore, the district will create interim goals to achieve this ultimate goal by the end of the 2025-26 school year. By the end of the 2023-24 school year, no less than 25% of all 8th grade students in all IAR identified subgroups will successfully complete Algebra 1. And the final goal, goal 4, the ultimate district goal is for all students to be considered, quote, college ready, even if those students do not plan to attend college. Therefore, the district will create interim goals to achieve this ultimate goal by the end of the 2026-27 school year. By the end of the 2022-23 school year, no less than 35% of all graduating GHS seniors in all IAR identified subgroups will be considered, quote, college ready. Do we have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I would just like to say, when we had a retreat and Dr. Asplin taxed us with coming up with some goals, to Mr. Jacobs' comment, we can have the nice buildings, but we need our children at another level. And I would challenge each of you there to go to the Illinois scorecard and look at some things. We're doing well, but we're behind in some areas that we quoted here, and that's not acceptable. And so as a sitting board, we're gonna have beautiful buildings and conditions. Now it's time to up our game and get our kiddos what they deserve and get them. And we have good staff, but we haven't had a focus. We've had a lot of other things pulling us in different directions. Now we get these buildings behind us, it's time to get down and make it happen. So that is why these goals are in here, and also I like how they're, by certain school years, we got benchmarks, are we hitting those? So.
I think I do not disagree. I want to make a few additional comments though. About 5 years ago, I'd say, we started conversations at this table about making sure that our curriculum was both horizontally and vertically articulated. So it's not as if we have not been paying attention to it. I do wanna make sure that folks understand we have been paying attention to it. But as to, other board member comments, we have had a lot of challenges, external challenges that have drawn attention to more immediate needs and not always the long-term needs that we're looking at right now. And to Mr. Jacobs' point, there were a lot of times in the past that we've agreed on a lot of things, and for a while there it may have felt like we might not have been agreeing on some things, but one of the things that I hold true to my seat on this board is making sure, to some people's bemoans, that our communities of color in this district have the same opportunities and that we are providing equity in all of our schools. That has been a sticking point of my voice at this table. And so while those numbers read all students, those are determined our goals because our African American and Latinx students they're not meeting their needs. And it is not just on our students. We need to make sure that we're asking ourselves at the board level, the administration level, and the teaching staff level, what are we doing now that we have these great buildings to make sure that our families and their students feel welcomed in the classrooms? What are we doing to make sure that they see themselves represented in the curriculum? What are we doing when somebody slams the door in our face and says, I do not want to talk to you? What is the reason behind that? This is an entire district effort, and it does not just fall on our students to be the responsible party, especially when they're in third grade. So I'm glad that we have these goals, and I'm glad that we're putting a focus there, and I just wanted to say that for the record because I'm not going to misconstrue what my point being at this table is, and that is to make sure that those who do not have every opportunity afforded to them do in this school district.
So one of the things that I did when I was looking at focus was I wanted to look at the trends, and so I definitely looked back at least good for almost 5 years. And one thing that was consistent is that our greatest minority population is African Americans in this district, and it has been. And they steadily are not meeting if you do look at the Illinois report card. So I do encourage everyone to do that. Behind that is Hispanics, and then another was looking at children who are in special education. So the most important thing, especially that Mr. Jacobs pointed out, is that we're only going to be as good as those children who aren't meeting. So until we can get them up to par, we really truly have to understand we need to do better. So that's the focus behind where I was at with helping create some of these goals. Everyone needs to get to where they need to be, but we really have to drive home and focus on those children who have not been meeting for a very long time. It's problematic, and it starts with us as a board to push this down to administration and staff. So with this, I'm really excited, I'll tell you. This isn't something that will happen overnight. It's gonna take a while to see it come in fruition, but this push is gonna be a great push, and our children deserve it. So I'm just really excited about what's gonna happen.
Well, I'm very excited to see this. It's audacious, it's a goal, but it's all achievable. Other communities have done it, there's no reason we can't. It's for everyone. And if you look at the scores and report card, they're not good for any subgroup. Subgroups are terrible, and minority groups are, the numbers are poor, and for the, if there is such a thing as majority culture, such group any longer, those scores are poor. It was unbelievably depressing, and I know we can do better. And I think by having a goal and limited number of goals, it's an achievable thing. Because this is why teachers are here. That's why we have a school district, so children can learn. This is our opportunity to focus on that and make it happen for all the children in our community. I'm really excited for this.
Any additional comments? No? Okay, well, I'll move on, to the next. Oh. Okay, we voted on this.
Murphy?
Aye.
Besta? Aye. Cervantes?
Aye.
Lyon?
Yes.
Ellis?
Aye.
Rodriguez? Aye.
Okay, now moving on to the next item on the agenda. Focus Area 2, the Building and Grounds Committee report.
Well, can we start with our pictures? Yes, it's a yes. Don't touch it.
Mr. Lyon?
Yeah, I'm doing this part.
Touching the screen.
Don't touch the screen, right, I got it. Now, first of all, I apologize to our children at the high school and the families, because we wanted this open for everyone to see this today. And it didn't happen. I apologize for that. But I was in there a few hours ago, and boy, it's gonna make it, right, Lee? We're gonna see it next Monday. What we have here are the columns, and there's 2.5 of them are tiled already in the front foyer. They're the stairway. And you see over here, the new railings that have been welded on to make it the correct height and safety issues that are all resolved. And they're gonna get painted at some point too, right?
Correct.
Right, now they're all just welded. We come here is the welcoming center area in the principal's, the administrative suite at the high school. And you see the finishes are all there. They're probably not like my mother's living room. They're probably gonna take off the plastic covering. Okay, let me go on to the next. These both are the nursing center at the high school. Right, 11. It's really quite amazing. I mean, through this door is the area where people will greet the public into our lovely 712 facility. And if anyone drove by it since Friday, you'll see the new logo is posted on the wall outside there in the office area. Okay. And you're just moving down that hallway then into the administrative section. These are some of the offices then. Okay, and here's a sample of classrooms. With the exception of the lab classrooms, they all have this pattern in the tile. It's very interesting, it's very nice. They're new painting, new ceilings, new lights, they have fire alarms and sprinklers, and they're almost ready. The only thing missing in some of these classes is the windowsill. I believe everything else is done in these rooms. This is the second floor commons, which will eventually be the eating space for the 7th and 8th graders, coming next year when they join the building. This area right here used to be the balcony for the auditorium. And this area here had big angle pieces all been cut out. They'll probably be tiling this tomorrow or something. And for this year, it's becoming the teacher's lounge, correct?
Yes.
Is that correct? Yes. Because we won't have the 7th and 8th graders there this year. But these windows are new. It looks out in the court into the courtyard. And the other side, which you can't see, are the windows overlooking the commons for the 9th and 12th grade. Which is right here. There's the other side of the window.
Yes. That's my favorite part.
Now,
Oh my God, no. Nice.
this is the back of what used to be the auditorium, which is now will be the eating space next Monday for our 9th through 12th graders. And this wall here has been taken down, so the folding doors to the servery is all open and it looks awesome. And this floor is now finished. So, and these columns here, as you see, there's some tall eating tables have been mounted already, and these are also getting tiled. Same tile as the other, is that correct? Yes. When it is get finished, this will have a wood tone laminate all the way up to that height, all the way along the outside wall, and there are some more lights being hung in. But otherwise, this is close to the finished look pre-furniture that children will get next Monday. And here's, oh, here's the folding doors to the servery right there. And that's the area that used to be the eating space, is now the servery. And after a year of putting it off, using it, it's very exciting for our students to be in there next week. And this is it. Okay. These aren't kitchens. This is the culinary arts. Culinary arts classroom. Has a lot of equipment. And it's pretty awesome in terms of that. And this was referenced in Mr. Houston's discussion of the culinary arts. This is the room he was speaking about. And this isn't trick photography. It really is that big of a room. Okay? This is the entrance off the West Circle Drive, which is now labeled West Circle Drive. The overhang has been painted. It looks fresh. There's new sidewalks, new streets, and the logo is posted there on the outdoors. And the last picture is showing the work on the additional classroom for the 10th and 12th graders, which will be ready this spring, as long as it's ready by August. And that's being built out at the end of what had been the area vocational center, which is coming along extremely nicely, and will be open. Part of it will be open next Monday because there are 3 art classes in there, and they've come along a whole lot in the last week. They did a lot of work 2 weeks ago, but it's coming along, and we'll have 1,200 students out there next week, and I can't believe how excited I am. I hope faculty and students are as well. Okay? That's the update of that building project. We have some other updates as well.
So, I'm not gonna get up there, but, so to Ms. Smith's question on Northwoods, which we're now referring to 940 building, because that happens to be the address of that building, so we like acronyms and numbers, it just makes it easier. So, update on the 940 building. So you heard Mr. Houston give an update on the budget. So the GAVC is already in the south end of that building and is functional, and students will be attending there next Monday. They could be in there already, but we waited so the whole populace is on campus. So you've got your ag is back there, your auto body, your welding, your CAD. It's all new back there, and they've got a lot of space. It's very nice. The north part, then, we just started with Leggett on designing floor plan and layout there. So our Bright Futures program is going to come to the 940 building. And a little farther out, potentially the central offices that are here will go to the 940 building. Before anybody throws tomatoes at me and yells at me because the central office moving again, my position on is that this is the last move, the last horizon, the last situation. We do have people interested in this building, so there's a lot of other things going on, but we would move long-term. The central office would be where the Bright Future, in with Bright Futures also. So you would have a campus, if you will, of the 712 at the high school. You would have your GAVC, you'd have your Bright Futures, and you'll have your central office. So everybody is together, if you will. The design we've seen that Leggett is putting forth for us is very functional. It's very using space, and it's giving those preschoolers area to learn also. We will also, you will see, we will have an outside area for those children so that they can get the Maury has a word for it, but the real world feel and learn to climb and depth perception and all that. So we will have that area out west of the 940 building to be the northwest corner. And it's going to be very functional, very, very well done. I know the community, of the community members that was the church were, concerned what we're going to do. It's going to be very functional, and the community is, and we will also have it laid out that we can have trainings there, we can have community events there. It will be your building, and so we're going to use it as such. I don't want to speak when we'll go out for bids, but it'll be sooner than later so that we can get the Bright Futures up and running. Am I missing anything, Maureen?
Very good example. We'll be bringing some tentative plans to the board probably next month.
Yeah, next month we'll probably present some tentative plans. Not to put any pressure on Liggett, but he's shaking his head. But we are moving forward on this because we realize the need and to get that going. So it's going to be very nice.
One additional project that we discussed in the Building Grounds Committee was in one of the skeletons of the building at the former Galesburg High School building. There's some work to remediate some damage in the tunnels under the foyer, and we're bringing to you next month the bid documents for what? The bids? Yeah. I thought we were just bringing documents. I'm sorry. The bids on remediating that damage that needs to be fixed. And we're glad that we have the revenue and the resources to bring that to fruition.
I'll make a comment. That's one of Rodney's skeletons that I've said we would find in that building. And
I haven't been that many.
there have been, but this one, and I did not realize, and everybody needs to know that it's like a crawl space when you come into that high school. There's a crawl space under there, and I was unaware of that. And so that was from 1958. So let your mind wander on what's going on down there. But we've got good people in Liggett and Russell that we're going to have a safe environment, get it fixed, and we'll be okay. But there was one of those skeletons that, aha. So.
What's that skeleton?
Okay, I believe under this focus area as well, we have Mr. Murdoch from Russell Construction. Lee.
Like, who's that?
Was it? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so giving a little detail where we're at our current high school. As you saw through the photos, we made a lot of progress during last week. ROE inspection is on Thursday, and we're on staff moving in this week, and then while students are Monday. So you may ask, what's still outstanding? So it's still an active construction zone. We have a lot of areas that we're occupying concurrently with school in session, like we've done in other buildings. In the areas we're turning over, there is still some flooring work that may happen, or will happen after hours. Majority of that will be confined to the corridor space. So we've worked from the classrooms to the corridor to try to minimize that disruption. Same with some ceilings. There's a handful of ceilings in the corridors that are still being worked on. Any of those areas that do not have ceilings in, those corridors when students come in will have temporary lighting. Similar to what was done last year for the band area in that corridor out of by the kitchen. So we had ceilings were out, temporary lights were in, so you can get safe egress. At nights we'll have the crews come in, and weekends working on progressing that ceiling down the corridor until it's done. Hallways and the painting. So right now, if you go in those areas in the first floor, they're really vanilla. Just white. That's not the final design. They put a lot of work and effort into kind of making those areas shine. So as nights and weekends go on, those will come to their final design. The two big things you're gonna see that's missing throughout, and has to do with material supply chain issues, is lockers, as you've heard me talk about many times. So those are on track, last we heard, for late September delivery. So in the space right now where lockers are, they are plastic off, so that way students are in a safe environment, can't get into the locker cavities. And as we get lockers in at nights, they'll be taking out the banks, put them in as they go. And then marker boards, we did have a delay in marker boards towards the end of the project. They're telling us late October for all the marker board deliveries. So right now, those classrooms unfortunately do not have marker boards or display boards. They will be coming this fall. That's what I've been told. So when those get here, we'll be getting those up as well.
How many approximately do we not have of those?
All.
Oh, that's cool.
So there's probably a couple semi-truckloads once we start getting them coming in. There's a lot of market boards. Stair railings are going up. I think those should be all welded up by the point classes start by Monday, but they may not be all painted. So as we go progress, I'll get those painted in the final product. They will be kind of a charcoal gray color. Right now they're a mixture of the old colors and also molding, molds and grinding. So look a little rough right now, but they are safe. They're up the ADA height. If you ever in that building before and stood next to them, they always felt kind of low. They were. So that's how they were built back in the 50s. They're up this height now. So, and then, so that's kind of the main areas you're going to see. The areas that will still be under construction during kids being in there that are segregated off will be the library section. Part of that same wing, I don't remember when that was built, by the old GHS North. There's 5 classrooms there, and on the second floor, if those are not in this first turnover, they'll be in the second turnover later this fall. And then, common grounds, which is right outside the lobby, is boarded up when you come in right now. We're working on a piece of mechanical equipment there. Once that's in, we can get that set and finalized up. And then, I think what other areas? That's the main
Area B and A.
And then as we go through B and A, but that's farther down the road, so. And then we'll be working on the addition to the south. We've held off on starting some of those additional items because of the additional access we wanted to get into the auditorium. So we moved our access out of the south. You've seen equipment going in and out. They're starting to lay block up for the control booth inside that auditorium this week. So they're getting all the equipment out there and starting to lay that into verticals. So some work happening inside that auditorium here, and as crews shift from the main high school to those ancillary spaces here. Any questions that were?
Yeah, Lee, if you let Lion Locker know that we did pay them 20% more, and they still haven't delivered the product. And I know you get tired of me hearing that, but that is a burr under my saddle.
It's a burn of a lot of our saddles.
Yeah.
They missed the deadline. Yeah. Thank you.
On the lockers, has the date changed or is it pretty firm? They don't keep moving it back, do they?
No, the last day we heard, this has been over a month ago, was shipment starting in middle to end of September, and that date's been holding. So I know.
September 22nd is the first shipment, is when it's supposed to leave. It should arrive here by the 26th. 4 days from Oregon.
It's a day drive.
So something I will say to everybody in the audience and listening, that kudos to all the people that work out there, but you realize several meetings back we had a discussion about electrical, and we may have to rent a big generator to do a switchover. Between Russell and all the work, they were able to phase that in 3 different phases, so we did not have a big downtime on power. And I can hats off to them. If anything has went really, really smooth, that did go really, really smooth. And they did have to have a generator for a couple days, but nothing like we thought we were gonna have to do. So that I commend you on that, and please tell those people that was amazing. That went off without a hitch, and that was good. The other thing I'll say, labor has been short, labor has been tight. Maura and I go in there and shake our head. But the people that have been working there have busted their tail for us. And some of that doesn't happen overnight, but they've turned some miracles in there. That's amazing. And they haven't, sometimes you think when that happens, you're getting work short, you're getting shorted. I don't notice that. We're still getting quality work, and we could use more people, but for the people that are there, they've done a lot for us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I will give kudos to the electricians as well. They had plan B and C during that shutdown, and we went through all those plans to make that happen. The existing duct bank was found to be non-viable, and we had to pull in plan B and C to keep everything on schedule, and that did happen. So, we don't like using those backup plans, but they planned well and made that happen, so they did a great job. And those electricians specifically and some others that worked a lot of hours in the last few weeks, and they've done a great job, so I appreciate that. Kudos to them, I'll definitely share that with the crews on site, that's appreciated, so.
No more questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
Moving on, consider approval of facility use agreement with the city of Galesburg. Motion. Second. Thank you. Dr. Ask?
This is a yearly usage agreement we put together with the city to share space. Mr. Matthews, I don't believe there was any changes to the agreement for previous years, right?
No, we just kind of reverted back to pre-COVID,
Right.
so, yes.
Alright, so they use our tennis courts, we use the pavilion, I mean, it's the same usage agreement we've been approving every year.
Any questions? Seeing no questions?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. The next item is to consider approval of resolution for the sale of Nielsen Elementary School. Motion.
Oh, don't we need to?
Oh, we can amend it.
Oh, never mind. Yeah.
I think Pam had it.
Okay. Okay, I'll go ahead. So last month you asked me to get a recommendation from 2 realtors. Believe me, it was not from lack of trying. We only got 1 realtor to give us a hard opinion. But we did get a hard opinion that from 1 very respected realtor in town who said the price should be $562,900 for the Nielsen property. So Luke, I will turn it over to you to once again explain the process for putting out the bid, what our responsibilities are, and what the resolution says.
So the school code provision governing the sale of real estate is relatively strict. You're first required to adopt a resolution, and then notice must be published for 3 consecutive weeks in the local newspaper. Then you have a sale by auction. In this case, that is a sealed bid auction with the highest 3 bidders being able to raise their bid on opening. Occasionally that will get you slightly higher. So we've included in the resolution a blank that the board can, if it wants to, choose to fill in, which would be to set a minimum bid price. You're not required to set a minimum bid to sell. If you do, however, you must sell at or above the minimum. If the minimum bid is not hit, if there are no bids at or over the minimum, the board would have the option to engage a broker, a realtor, to list the property. The realtor can then list the property for 120 days. The caveat being that any contract that comes from the listing has to be, again, at or above the minimum. So the catch with the minimum bid is to set it high enough that you're not wasting your time with frivolous bids, but not so high that it's unachievable. Happy to answer any questions beyond that.
Well, I'd like to add one other thing that I've never really discussed with the board, is that if a non-tax exempt entity buys the building, that will be added to the property tax rolls. So to the extent that somebody else pays more, that's the ability to have other people pay less. So that whatever the arm's length transaction is where the assessor should put the price of the building. Now, if it's a tax exempt organization, it doesn't matter. But if it is not, that means that, let's just say it's $563,000, so a third of that value would go on the property tax rolls for us to be able to get property taxes out of that group as well. So there is another added benefit to the school district by getting a higher price, because it does then add to the property tax.
If a non-profit purchase.
Correct. If it's an exempt body, then it doesn't matter.
So we're looking at a number right now?
Well, I would recommend no less than 550,000, given the fair arm's length transaction. 562.9. I threw a number out there, you can always choose to reject it.
No, I don't know, it's a lot of building on, what is it, 6 acres or 8 acres? It's an easy place to get to from the highway, really, because it's right in front of a new bridge right there. I mean, it's, Mr. Jacobs mentioned, mentioned Cook's sale. More recently, because that was the Allen Park store, we sold Cook though for $300,000, $310,000, and that's less than half the size on a smaller lot. In an industrial area. For 5 years.
Still factors into the number.
It's not, it's not Butler building.
So Luke, so what I'm hearing you say, if we establish a number and we get 0 bids, then we have the ability to go to a realtor to sell that building at or above the number that we were trying to get a sealed bid on, correct?
That's correct. Or if if someone submits a bid lower than the minimum, you could not accept that. And then you could move forward with the realtor. The other piece I should clarify is if a bid comes in at or above the minimum, the board is not required to accept that bid. You can always reject all bids. So if a bidder were to submit a bid, say $5 over the minimum, rolling the dice that there are no other bidders, the board could still reject all bids. You would then simply start the process over.
Or if it was a paintball competition group that wanted you, so you want to be a good neighbor, you can reject it for that as well.
You can. So you can reject all bids and start over at any point in time.
And when you start over, another sealed bid process?
Another sealed bid process and another 3 weeks notice. Now, you could choose to do a traditional or live auction rather than a sealed bid. Our experience has been for school district property, that's not always the best option. Just because your bidders aren't used to an auction, a traditional auction format. If you're selling, if the district had farm ground, you were selling, that'd be a different story because the bidders are used to that format. But for non-traditional properties, you can do it by auction, but the sealed bid tends to work better. And then you have that mini auction among the high 3 bidders, which ideally gains you an extra, say, 5%.
And what's your recommendation then?
Mine was 550. It's just below the minimum, or below what the realtor says is the fair market value for it. That encourages people to bid.
And it could go above that.
Hopefully it would go above that.
You don't need to go back to work, so I think we'd be a little bit more sure, but that's the starting point, and if people are gonna bid on it, like you said, we can always turn it down. If we don't think that's what we want, we don't have to accept it. So I think that's your starting number.
If you get 2 or 3 at that minimum bid, then we open and we can negotiate between the 3.
It's not exactly a negotiation, so I believe the way we phrased, I think we put blanks in, so I don't know what the district, normally we'll say the top 3 bidders can raise their bid on open. So, if you have 3 bids at or above minimum, and those bidders attend the opening, then they can raise their bid. So that's solely designed for the district to scratch a little more return out.
But that's the time to bid, so let's just say it's a month from now, and we're October 13th, and we have bid A, bid B, bid C are there, we go, okay, who says 562? Who's okay, 563, 562.5. I mean, then you kind of start seeing if anybody wants to move up incrementally. But right there in front of it.
Yeah, that would all take place at the bid opening. And sometimes no one raises their bid, it gives the district the ability to potentially increase, even if it's only slightly.
And for somebody who's holding back a little bit, hoping to go low, they get in there maybe in the top 3, but they can't go too low, and maybe they're not in the top 3. There's a way there to try to protect both sides.
Well, the way this is written, it doesn't give us much bargaining power. What I mean by that is, so you're asking for what minimum to put at it, and basically that's what we probably expect we're gonna get. And I'm uncomfortable with that. Because an auction is always somebody's opinion. This isn't an auction, so we as a board have to decide what we're comfortable with on a number, because the odds of at an opening getting another 100 or 150,000 are very slim. So this is not like a real estate auction at all. We're basically setting our destiny right here. Of whatever number we say, we're okay with living with, basically.
Well, yes and no. What you're saying is you would not accept anything less than that, because to do that, you would have to start the process over. If the board's uncomfortable with the minimum, you can go through with the notice of sale with no minimum. Now, you may get somebody that throws in a bid for $10. So you may have some of those what I would call a waste your time bid. But there's no requirement that you impose a minimum. The advantage to the minimum is you filter out the bids that are there, just because someone thinks you're gonna dump it at the first opportunity. And you would have the option to list with a realtor if the minimum is not hit. But this provision of the school code does not give you a lot to work with in terms of flexibility or negotiation. The only viable way you can do that is if you're selling to another public body, then you're exempt from this section and you're under the Local Government Property Transfer Act.
Well, and one other question I want to make sure the board's clear on too. So let's just say, who knows if this would ever happen, but let's just say the person that gets the highest bid, the board doesn't want to sell it to them for whatever reason, okay? When they go to a realtor then, does the realtor have the flexibility or do they have to go to the highest bidder?
So you only get to a realtor if there's no bid over the minimum. So if there's one bid over the minimum, the board can reject all bids, but then you're starting the process from scratch. Okay. You're not getting to the realtor. So that's the part of it with that 3 consecutive weeks publication. The reset, there is a time cost to the reset.
I believe we don't need whatever number it is to balance our budget. So we're not in a hurry. So if the rest of the board's comfortable with the 550 recommendation of the superintendent, I could live with it.
I'm opposite. Why would you list it less than what the realtor said it's worth? Why wouldn't you go with the 562.9? And I'm superstitious. You never go with an even number anyway. You always have look at gasoline. You never have an even number. I'm okay. I would say 562.9 if that's what the realtor.
And that's fine. My whole idea for doing was to try to invite bidders to try to outdo each other a little bit. We have to get above that, but your logic is sound. I mean, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
What is the square footage? Oh,
Forty-one, right?
A little over, like 41,000.
41,000, about eight acres of, 12.
12 acres?
So if you think about you think about square footage and acreage in today's environment, the 562.9 to me is not enough.
You can always put it higher, and then if no one bids, you can always come back later.
You can always come down, you can't go up. Pretty profound, huh, Warren? To think
General
about it.
negotiations, yeah.
So what's your suggestion, Rodney?
Yeah, pin it on me.
Well, you're the one that doesn't like the 550.
My first number was 600,000.
The 563 is about $13 a square foot, plus 12 acres of land. That seems pretty, sounds like a bargain to me.
I agree.
They're selling for almost 80 square foot right now. They're trying to sell the whole.
Oh, yeah, the building from is $225 to $250.
I think it's important to get the right, the right fighter in there. And as you said before, about having a,
The other
we can be
thing,
considerate of the neighbors in the community.
the other thing to remember, that land was donated by the Nielsen family back in the 70s to build that. So the district has had a good windfall off of that situation.
Used it for 50 years.
As
Can we table this and talk about it next meeting?
I think we should,
if you want to table it, I would suggest putting it for a much higher number. Because then we can always come back and talk about it later.
That's where I'm at. I think you go a higher number and test the waters.
What's your odd number you want to use? 612, 750? 749.
Well, and just to be clear, I mean, the realtor that was kind enough to come and donate their time to do this, had difficulty with comparables because how many people in Guilford are selling schools? I mean, it's a difficult property to judge. And, to be fair, there's a lot of fixing up that needs to be done. We've been very transparent with the people that have indicated an interest in mine, about what those issues are. So, to Member Phelps' point and to Member Rodriguez's point, if you are hesitant about the number, you can always come back later and do a lower number. And we're only out a month because we're talking about 3 weeks, doing a bid. If you don't like the bid, then you're either having a special meeting or whatever. I mean, we're sitting there, we're not really doing anything with it, we're paying heat. We're mowing it. We're making sure that it's locked up at night. But it's not, we are not in a state of desperation. So if you want to set a higher number and see if you get it, a building's worth what someone's willing to pay for it.
At $15 a square foot, it's $620,055.
Pretty good, all right. My number was 618.9.
I'm sorry?
That's not including 12 acres.
No.
Because that's another $120,000.
Really?
$10,000?
It's more than that.
That's for residential purposes.
So 15, that puts you at 620,055.
I had a number of 618.9. We're no hurry. You cannot come down in a situation like this.
20, which is the bargain of the 826. So even at $20 a square foot. That's not pushing the land, so.
you haven't said anything.
I agree with your comment that in negotiating, you can't, you don't start with your low price, you start with a high price and come down. I agree with that. Yeah, the price has to be reasonable enough to garner, potential buyers. I quickly looked online at schools for sale, and the prices are all over the place, depending on what they are. But $13 a square foot for any building that's viable for commercial use. Is it zoned? For that? Another question I there. And again, it's got a lot of good land. It's a great location within the city. I get to downplay the property. That's a. I can see better. Likewise, I'd also like to see some industry come into Harrisburg and provide the commercial property to encourage that. That'd be.
Well, if people are hesitant, I would highly recommend you shoot much higher, you can always come back to the set.
Let's start at Jim's recommendation of $20 a square foot, it's a starting point.
I think that's very reasonable.
820.
And again, that's not even counting the 12 acres.
12 acres.
Yeah, that's not even
Well,
counting.
just throw that in.
This thing writes itself.
No,
I like
no, you need to look at it, they buy the land and some people are gonna will flatten that building.
Yeah.
So you gotta look at the 12 acres as as a development property.
That'd be 820,000.
Going on even number, $826,740.
There you go, right there.
Throw the blank.
Is that your motion?
826,740.
Yes.
Okay, Rodney, would you like to amend your motion? Rodney, would you like to amend your motion?
I'd like to amend the motion that we put out for sealed bids at 826,740.
You second your amended?
Any additional discussions on the 826, 740?
So what would be our timeframe here? This could happen this week?
Well, we need to get it in the, advertised for 3 consecutive weeks in the paper, so at best, we'd be coming back at the October meeting with the report, otherwise we got a special meeting, so we wouldn't want to wait too much.
It takes a couple days for us to get something in the register mail, so we can probably get it in for Thursday or Friday at the very latest.
And then it's 3 weeks.
3 consecutive weeks it has to.
Once a week for 3 weeks, publication.
And then we have to hold, correct me if I'm wrong, we have to hold an auction, we have a meeting where we open up bids, much like construction, but then it changes at the end where we give the top 3 an opportunity, if somebody has exceeded, hit or exceeded the minimum.
Well, they do not have to be present, but if the top 3 open and you're not present, you're gonna have a hard time raising your bid.
Right, so we have to say you must be present if you want to bid.
Then even at the end of that, it's still gonna come back to the board to accept the high bid, there's no default. So often what districts will do is figure out when they want to hold the board meeting and bid opening, and then sort of back into the publication schedule.
So in the bid, do they have to give us name and all that of who it is? There can't be some blind LLC put a bid in? We don't know who it is.
There has to be an entity that is capable of signing the contract. But beyond that, I don't know that any lender is required to give you much more information than that.
Will they have to give us contact info so we open the bid and they're not there, we can contact them to see if they wanna raise their bid?
Yes, yeah, well, the raising would occur if they're in person. So the bids have to name who the buyer is, who the person who would sign the contract. But in terms of that could be an LLC, it could be an individual, and someone can buy this from you and then immediately turn around and transfer it as well. So there's, from a practical standpoint, there's a lack of control on that factor.
Except, what I would also say is, when we get to the part where the board is gonna approve it, we can vet. And if we're digging down a hole to find out, oh, this isn't, we can always vet.
You can always reject all bids, you still own it, and you start the process over.
Okay.
And in your documents, it's sold as is.
It's as is, it will be as is. The terms of the sale that are not included in the notice, and this is to prevent the notice from being pages upon pages long. The notice says that the contract for sale that the operator has to sign is going to be available for inspection at the district office during business hours. What we normally do, once the board approves the resolution to sell, we'll work with the administration to finalize the contract terms so that's ready for buyers to look at if they want. But so the as is included in the notice. It will also be included in the underlying contract.
If we got the notice in by Friday, then the last Friday would be October 1st, then that's the week before the board meeting. So if you have the bid opening on Tuesday or Wednesday of October 5th or 6th, then it would be ready for approval by the board on the following Monday night.
And if it wasn't, you just got
Or
to schedule a
reject it.
special meeting if we're not done.
Pretty adept at special meetings.
Is that your normal 30-day closing after bid accept then?
Yeah, the statute requires 60 days from when you start, but no, the normal contract timeline possession would be delivered on closing. You need a month to get the title process done. You certainly could order the title work early if there's some need to get that done early, but the standard contract window is 30 days.
Okay, any more questions, comments?
Yeah, I got another comment. There's a lot of benches, there's a lot of memorial plaques and things. I want to make sure that those get removed before we even list it, so that nobody, because somebody drives by and sees that, they think they have that. So, and I know we're going to talk later in the agenda about the why, but we need to think about that too, because if I'm a potential buyer and I see the paper and I drive by and I see things, then that you think it comes with it. So, yeah. So
that will be spelled out, so the contract will list any personal property that is going to transfer with the building. So typically fixtures, anything that is built in or permanent, will transfer unless you specifically exclude it. So if there's anything that is tabled to come out of the building, we'll need to, that is a fixture, we would need to identify that. Beyond that, we would list the personal property that will transfer with the building. The personal property meaning the term for anything that's not built in. The district has the ability to dispose of personal property by passing a resolution finding that it is surplus, and then you can dispose of that at either a public or private sale. So you have far more latitude on how you sell or donate desks and things like that.
Is there anything in the building?
Yeah.
Right now, we're storing some items in there that we have intention of taking out.
Okay, no more questions? Allison?
Santos? Aye. Aye.
Yes.
Phelps?
Yes.
Rodriguez? Aye. Murphy?
Aye.
Prescott?
Next item on the agenda is consider approval of 940 Fremont Fence Phase 1 through 3. So moved.
Second.
Ms. Salem?
We have quite a bit of fence work to do at the 940 building property, but there is one section of the south end of the property line that needs to be addressed immediately for safety purposes and security purposes of that property. So the bid that you have in front of you tonight is for a 3-phase project to put that 6-foot privacy fence on the entire 145 feet of the south property. And to get that up, we will have additional fencing that will be required once we have the site plan finalized by Leggett. But right now, this is to ensure that our students and staff are safe. There's been a fence that's been knocked down. Actually, I heard a story from Mr. Houston today that somebody drove through the parking lot and actually, with a Jeep, drove through the back, which is a grass area, the other day, to hit the back street. So we want to secure that sooner than later. So that's why we're bringing the bid tonight for that 145 feet of property line.
And tire shredder too, right?
There's a lot of transient traffic goes through there, and so we needed to get that shut off. And then we had a where an elderly gentleman was driving back the other day and hit the power box. So, I mean, we've got to get that secured, stop all that stuff going through there for that.
It says on this bid sheet, which you probably recommend, it's only good for 10 days, and we're on day 11.
They're aware of it.
Okay.
So
We're
they're
meeting.
knew that our board meeting was.
I just know it says the steel market, and we've been dealing with that. So I just wanted to make sure our bid is still good, and we can call them tomorrow.
This isn't Lion Locker.
Yeah.
Stealth Locker.
Yeah.
Okay, no more questions, Allison?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Okay, next item, consider approval of change order request for the junior, senior high school, additional sidewalk. So moved.
Second.
Ms. Salem?
So as we're, do you want to talk? Go ahead.
I can.
No, absolutely.
So I was asked through high school coming on board, area A and B, as we talked about, is the north of the old TABC, still under construction. The permanent access to the field house will be through that wing to the existing diagonal sidewalk, which is not accessible right now. So there's concern through this school year, especially this winter, access into the field house for PE. So we're asked to put together an additional walk from the new West Circle Drive going straight north and intersecting that diagonal path. So it's about 370 lineal feet of sidewalks, 6 foot wide would be the appropriate use for the space planning. And so a pretty large sidewalk, but it'd be connecting that West Circle Drive, going in parallel with the football stadium, and then bisecting that diagonal wall. The price for that is $30,913.18.
And I would add that while it's definitely a need this year, it'll fill a need for a long, I mean, many years after that. I mean, students won't all have to come out of area A to hit that sidewalk. And people that want to park over at Circle Drive, for whatever reason, then they have a very simple walk to the field house as well. I mean, we use that, and we'll be using it more and more for a lot of junior high events as well. So, I mean, that's going to really open up a whole lot of parking access for people to the field house going forward. So at that price, I thought that was a very, very fair price for that much sidewalk.
Yeah, it does, there's this new handicap parking in that West Circle Drive, and that would connect the handicap parking to the handicap access to the field house through that back gate. So there's a benefit there. If you remember, you go through that gate, there's the access to the field house where the elevator is, you go through the second level. So there is a nice accessibility path there.
How deep is that? Concrete.
I think it's a 4-inch with every base, 4 on 4. We have to check the specs, but it's the same as we've been putting everywhere else. So it's concrete on top of rock. So the price is excavating the existing soils, compacting rock and replacing concrete back, and then putting back backfill and seed. So we can press it. that's all included in this.
Thank you, Lee. Allison?
Ryan?
Yes.
Phillips?
Yes.
Rodriguez? Aye. Trippy?
Aye.
Testab? Aye. Tomatoes?
Okay, next is focus area 3, responding to the changing needs of our community. First one is. No problem. Okay, I'm sorry, I missed the identifier. Okay, the first one is considering approval of the YMCA agreement. Need a motion?
Second. And me.
Excellent. Dr. Esposito.
Thank you. So this one I talked about last month. This is outlining the donation of the playground equipment at Yale to YMCA. So it's basically the YMCA is going to come and take all of the playground equipment and then restore the ground to flat ground, and it absolves us of any liability. So it's a benefit to the community because it'll be some very nice playground equipment that can go really not very far from where it is now, but it'll be used by a lot more people, and it takes labor away from us. We don't have to worry about it, and it makes that playground usable.
Will that include, there's metal structures there like monkey bars and a dome thing, is that all of that then?
It's supposed to be taking everything. There is one area I will say that is, we're gonna have some demolition at some point. If you remember, on the southeast corner of the playground, there's a concrete ramp that goes up to that structure that we're not actually gonna remove that concrete. But that's, other than that, everything else is restored to space.
Okay. See no more questions?
Phelps?
Yes.
Rodriguez? Aye. Trippy?
Aye.
Testab? Aye. Tomatoes?
Aye.
Ryan?
Okay. Next item is consider approval of press release policy. This is the second reading. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We do have a couple of, I would say, significant changes, so they're included in your packet. Two board policies that 490 and 725 that deal with fundraising and what we allow students to do. It does not prohibit, if you look at those policies, it does not prohibit students from raising money, but what it does say is it is the board's goal to prohibit. It's our desire. So what that does, it gives us the ability to go to those organizations and say, really, we want to do everything we can to eliminate students going door to door, students doing selling. This is left up to adults to do that if at all possible. There's also a significant change there where we also say it's the board's desire to eliminate outside agencies from raising money by selling. So if you're thinking like Fannie Mae or things like that. Those companies have a history of taking a $4 item, making it a $12 item, and basically taking a profit. It doesn't say we can't do it, but it does say that it's strongly dissuade you from doing it. And that there is another change in there that it is a desire to sweep all of those fundraising efforts every year down to zero. It doesn't mean you can't carry over balances, but we want you to push those to zero. What we're trying to eliminate is people fundraising for the sake of fundraising. That if you're going to raise funds, you're going to say why you're raising the money, and the goal is to spend the money that year. There are obvious exceptions to that. If the band is raising money band booth is raising money for new uniforms, which will be many years from now, so we just did it. But that would be something we don't expect them doing here. If the football program, for whatever reason, to the booster club is raising money for some huge piece of equipment, it's going to take more than 1 year, of course. But we shouldn't just assume that funds are going to carry over. We want people to raise the money and spend it that year. And if you don't need the money, you don't have to fundraise. Because we've spent a lot of time asking people for money, but not really having a plan for what we're going to do with that money. So we're asking people to have a plan.
So how does this affect Booster Club then?
Well, the Booster Club would be the conduit by which athletic teams, it's the athletic booster club, would raise money. And then the band boosters would raise money, but they do that now for the band. So the booster club would be the entity that would be holding on to the money rather than putting it in our funds as much as humanly possible.
Are they aware of this?
Yes.
So, this kind of caught me off guard, to be honest with you. So, you have a team or a group that wants new uniforms or something. How do they get those?
Well, first of all, I'm really glad you asked that question. We have a unit, and I can ask Mr. Matthews to fill in any gaps I mess up. We have a uniform schedule where teams get new uniforms on schedule. Okay, so depending on the school, depending on the age, depending on the level, everybody should get new uniforms.
Do all the teams and coaches know that?
Yeah. One of the things that we
Why don't you use the
have
microphone,
these
please?
conversations is, we feel that we're in a position that teams shouldn't have to go out and fundraise to buy uniforms. I think that is a fair statement, unless it's something crazy. But that would we'd have to go through the chain of command to even prove something like that. So, since I've been here, that has been our goal, and we have gotten to that point now where we shouldn't have to be going out and fundraise to purchase what the district should be able to provide, which is a uniform. So, that's one less thing. Hopefully, the coaches won't have to worry about going out and fundraise to buy a uniform that what the district should be able to provide.
Well, and this is not, believe me, having been in many school districts, this is not just Galesburg. But we're also keenly aware of the fact that the baseball and football and basketball teams can raise a heck of a lot more money than the golf team and the scholastic football team and the cadets and the cross country and tennis. And so we don't want there to be favored children in the district. We want everybody to have the same opportunity. And as great as it is that some teams have multiple sets of uniforms, that's not really equitable. And so we want to get to a position where, let's just say like the softball team has the same number of uniforms as the baseball team. And we've had a lot of situations where people have gotten multiple sets of uniforms, but it was more of a want than a need. And we're trying to get to where the district provides all of the needs for all of the teams and all of the groups, and not rely on the booster club to do that. A uniform shouldn't be a reason somebody's raising money. It shouldn't be. I'm not saying it never is, but it shouldn't be. Because we should be providing those.
So are there other things, outside of the uniforms that, these teams are fundraising for, whether, it might be drinks or,
charter buses for games has been a reason.
I mean, there are things that come up like during the summer.
Camps, whatever
They
it
have
might
entry
be.
fees that they go to and they play in shootouts. Over Christmas break, our teams go and they stay in hotels there and you pay. So there are these gray areas that fall into that I don't really feel like the district should pay for those. So they kind of fall in this gray area. So as Dr. Aspelin and Mrs. Ham and I have talked about this a lot and I agree, we don't need to fundraise unless we have a goal in mind, what we're trying to do. I mean, we shouldn't just be doing it to doing it, just to have money sitting on account. That makes no sense. So those discussions will have to be had. Okay, what are we fundraising for? What are we going to do with it? How much do we need? What is the goal of what we're trying to have? So then we can budget out. Okay, we need X, Y, and Z for the year. That makes sense. We work for that. Figure out whatever we have. We have trivia nights out there that people do, and those are great. In my opinion, those are adult things. The kids aren't involved. That money, what's it going to be used for? We earmark it. We work with the booster club. That's what it's there for, and we just move going forward with it. That's the athletic part of it. Sure. But it's having why are we doing what we're doing? What is the goal in mind?
So it's not stopping them from being able to still do those things that they were
No.
doing as far as like camps, whatever they wanna
No.
allocate
No.
it to.
No.
But it's just kind of saying, all right, here's the goal, you
Yeah,
have these
Like
accounts,
football,
they just
they're
need to
gonna
be at
do
zero.
headsets, and those are like 7,000, so we work
Yeah.
towards, okay, that's the goal that we're trying to get to, how can we get to that?
Right, so
With working
in
together.
the past too, it's been siloed, so like, you know, boys basketball goes and has this, and then this money for boys basketball. What we're trying to get to is the booster club has a pool of money, and then Mr. Matthews works with the coaches, so let's just say it's the spring, so, you know, the fall coaches are meeting with him in the spring to get their list of, you know, camps or shoes for kids who can't afford them, or, you know, whatever those things are. And then he's able to go to the booster club and say, okay, the cross-country team wants this for this, the, you know, the football team wants this for this. So that there's a planning and process that's going through this. We have a pool of money, but it's available to all groups, rather than saying, okay, the football team raises all this money, and so all this money just goes to the football program. And, you know, being a former football coach, it was easy to raise money, okay, as a football. And then, as a cross-country coach, it's darn near impossible to raise money. I mean, it's just, we're trying to be more equitable, because every program is important.
I think that if we're gonna, so first of all, just to say that this isn't part of this policy is not actually a choice. The state passed a policy and we are working within the guidelines of that policy to figure out what we're doing, but I would say that as we implement this, I know that our role at the board table is policy and that practice is your level, but I think that one of the suggestions that I would make, putting this policy into practice, is doing a team-by-team assessment of things like that, right? When was the last time the team had uniforms? Probably putting together some kind of definition of what makes up a uniform. Does that include warm-ups? Does that include jackets? Does it include, you know, different things, right? Because some teams use those, some teams don't. And so that the coaches know clearly what they are going to be fundraising for, right? Is it that they're gonna have a base uniform, and if they want a jacket, and I'll just speak because I've been working with cadets for so long, right? They're gonna have a jacket that says cadets, but it's not typically part of their formal uniform, but it's something that they wear to have, right? Or like, so to create some kind of guidance for the coaches to make sure that there's a needs assessment, because I appreciate that coaches could possibly know that they're on a uniform schedule, but speaking from experience, I can't tell you the last time cadets had new uniforms. And that's not, I won't say that that's part of the current AD's position. I just know past ADs have been very clear who the priority have been for our sports teams, speaking from direct experience with that. And so I think if we're going to truly make this equitable, that assessment should happen to begin with, so that we know where all the teams are at and where we're kind of starting from.
Well, no doubt,
Yeah.
it needs to be transparent, it needs to be shown that, you know, look, everybody is on equal footing.
It needs to be like, this year basketball gets uniforms, this year football gets uniforms. Don't ask again until your time is up.
Well, one,
Obviously, we know
it's
football
easy
gets
to
brackets
say that,
more than a
but
basketball jersey.
sometimes
We
the
get that.
National Federation does change what the uniform has to look like.
Right.
And that's fine,
And
but you can't always come saying, I need a breast cancer jersey, I need a regular
No.
jersey, I need an away jersey, I need this. We can't do it all.
no, I'm not asking for that.
Or I can't.
But I also
football
want us
team
to
can't come
understand
every year
that,
asking for something
you
year
know,
after year.
something that we have to think about though is, I mean, when we go to play all these other places, and everywhere in the big cities, the other schools have these things. They have warm-ups, they have travel suits and those things, and our kids see it. And I think they should be able to have those things.
Well, I think to Member Savanta's point, I mean, I think that we need to have a very frank conversation, what is a uniform?
Correct.
Because, you know, a warm-up for track, I would consider that part of the uniform, others may not. So I just think you have to have those.
Yeah, there's gotta be a one, there's gotta be a need, but it has to also make sense at the same time.
Right.
So there's a lot of money sitting in accounts right now for different teams. So
Well, we've been spending them down.
Yeah.
what do we do with that money though?
We've been spending them down.
But if I'm let's pick a football, and I raised 10,000, we did. And so now are we gonna say that all money is general pool and it goes to where we want it to go?
according to this guideline, that is what the change is supposed to go towards.
So the dollars today,
No, dollars tomorrow.
but there's money in these accounts.
Right, and
And they are not equitable.
Right, but that money stays in there, we wanna spend it down.
For that-
Get it to zero.
For the whatever team, whatever group it is.
And in the future, that money gets raised to the boosters and it goes there, it's a pool out there, and the booster handles the request. Because right now, our current system benefits some and doesn't benefit us. And we understand that when you have people that gain, there's gonna be some that are gonna not have as favorite status as they used to, and that's not easy. But having, I should never say this, having discussions of equity is never easy. And so, you know, we are talking about some people dealing with less than what they've had. But we've also been dealing with folks that have said, well, I need, and we hear it, we go, I didn't need, I don't want. You know, and so we get, at the district office, we get the, I'll just say, very vocal complaints from the community saying, why is your hand out again? You know, and so we're trying to put a fence around that. We're trying to say, look, you know, if we're gonna ask for money, let's be very transparent about what we're asking money for. We wanna send the kids to overnight in Bloomington Normal or Taylorville or wherever we're going. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Let's just say why we're doing it. Hey, we're having a camp in the summer and we pay the coaches to go to the camp. Okay, well, let's say that. You know, that's what we're doing. I just think if we feel strong enough to use the money for something, we shouldn't be embarrassed to tell people why we're using the money. So we need to be very transparent. And we've had some issues in the past where we've had very generous donations for certain programs, and that isn't precluded, but as we try to move towards more equitable discussions, I think we'll see more of a rising tide lifts all boats type of discussion, because once again, looking at it from the lens of the softball team, we're looking at it from the lens of the golf team, we're looking at it from the lens of the tennis team, we're looking at it from those places, I'd be pretty ticked off. I mean, you know, there's while some teams are getting new uniforms every 2 years, other people are dealing with whatever's left over.
I will say this though, and I'll speak for myself. Nobody's been told no since I've been here. And if you look at what we've done in tennis, swimming, and track since I've been here, those sports usually get pushed to the side. They've gotten more than anybody else since I've been here.
And that's wonderful.
And so that has been a goal of mine since I've been here, to make sure that those sports that normally don't get those types of things, trying to make sure that we are taking care of them and showing them that they're equal to everything else. Because let's be honest, it's football and it's basketball and it's baseball. So it's trying to make sure that we spread the wealth to get at those other places. And you've seen the tennis courts, you've seen the windscreens, they're not all up yet, we're trying. What we've done with the swimming pool and the money that we put in there and all of that. And then track, high jump, pole vault mats, new hurdles. We've got another section. I mean, the amount of money that we put into those programs in the last 3 years is just astronomical, because they haven't been touched for so long. So, I mean, so we are doing those things and trying to make sure that we spread it out so that we're not just going right to the masses at a time, because I don't think that's fair either.
Well, and to be fair to the coaches, if they've had the same fundraiser on the same date for the last 25 years, it's not on them. I mean, I would assume I'd have it too. I mean, this isn't their fault. I mean, this is a change in direction. And so just having that discussion with the coaches and having the force of forward policy behind it for Eric and for me and for Jen and whomever, to get in front of those groups and say, look, this is a goal. It doesn't say you can never, but it says this is the goal. You know, we want to keep students out of the fundraising as much as possible. We want to keep outside groups out as much as possible. Now, as a side, I think the gold card should be an exception to that because it promotes local businesses. I mean, I think that's a difference. But, you know, just having an outside group come in and promise prizes to the kids who sell the most stuff, I'm sorry, I have a problem with that. If people want to be happy for that, it's okay. I just have a problem with that. It's raising money on the backs of kids and leveraging relationships with their relatives. And people give money they don't have. And a lot of that money goes to somebody who doesn't live here. You know, they go to St. Louis or who knows where. Absolutely.
Eric, we're not trying to drill you.
No,
This is the high school.
This is
But
the
this
ongoing-
goes- But this goes for the Lombard Gold Cards. This goes for the PTOs for all the elementary schools. It's not just the booster.
Well,
clubs
like,
for the
we
high
talked about
school.
the gold card, and this is a conversation I had with Lori Aiton the other day, because Canton just did this. Like, they went out, they cut the middleman out, so they made their own cards. The coaches went around to the businesses, and they got the businesses, and they made their own cards. So they said, instead of paying someone in to come in and make the cards for us, and do the business, we did the work, and they cut them out of it, and then they got to keep all of it. So there are, we're going to have to challenge to think, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna have to think outside the box a little bit to make it work. And that's okay. That's not a problem with that.
And
But we're always gonna have some needs that really don't fall on the district side, and that's where the relationship between us and the Booster Club, we're able to fill that gap so that we can get those things for those programs that they need and that they want. Because the kids want them, and it's nice to have them, because it makes them feel good. When they go on the road and they got a travel suit or whatever it is, and they walk in, like, they feel good because they see the other Western Big Six schools having the same things, and they want that.
So it's also impactful to then raise the money and spend it on, you know, if I'm
Right.
raising money, well, I wanna see it now.
Right.
I
And
can
here's-
have that money.
Right. We're not raising money for something we're gonna give a kid 2 years from now, whereas my daughter would be out of the volleyball program. I was like, well, I never got the opportunity to have something. So we need to recycle it through for that time for those kids.
So does this also account for the toys and trinkets that the third, fourth, and fifth grade used to sell and all that?
We're not doing that no more. No more wrapping paper, Lauren told me.
We don't do it. Alright, so this is district-wide, not just athletics?
No.
That's everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. What if I have a grandmother that wants to give money and it's because her grandson is on track and she wants it to go to track?
We have a policy for gifts to school.
Okay.
So that would go somewhat more towards that, but yeah, we still allow that.
My question is the Title IX coordinator involved in this whole process?
Well, we had talks, and Mindy's sitting back there, we had talks about, where equity reaches into, and this was part of that initial discussion to get there. Was she part of this, right? No, I will say she wasn't, she did.
Well, my understanding of Title IX, and I may be wrong, but it doesn't matter where the money comes from or what the source of the fundraising is. We are ultimately responsible for Title IX equity.
Yes. You're responsible for how it's given.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Very well put. We don't control where it comes, how it comes to us, we do control how it goes out.
And a policy like this would probably facilitate that, because
Absolutely.
if each individual sport is simply doing their own thing, then, like you mentioned, certainly it's easy for the football team to raise a lot of money. And it might be harder for a less popular team, you know, or not as many kids on the
High
team,
profile.
high profile.
But I mean, speaking as a former football parent, I'll say that even that fundraiser was not equitable. I mean, there were incentives that were built into that fundraiser that ended up creating issues of inequity. And so I appreciate us looking at all of this and figuring out how to make this work better and not make a student feel because they didn't sell a certain number of cards that their camp cost is gonna be more money because they didn't raise the money elsewhere. I mean, right, I mean, and I remember, I'm not on the boosters anymore, but I remember when I was, right, one of our challenges at that time was trying to do larger fundraisers and businesses telling us, hey, I just gave to such and such program. I just gave to such and such school. And it was hard as a booster, you know, to do those big asks because some of our businesses in town were being asked for little things from a lot of different entities. And so bringing this all under one entity, policy, whatever, I think it makes sense. I just wanna make sure that we're doing our due diligence as we put it into practice, that we're being cautious and intentional about the way in which we're providing equity among all the sports.
Any further questions, comments? Allison?
Rodriguez? Aye. Trippy?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Bestad? Aye. Maya?
Yes.
Phelps?
Aye.
Okay, next on the agenda, consider approval of resolution regarding WC transport. I was wondering if that was supposed to.
WC?
Do you need to make a transfer?
So moved.
Need a second? Okay. Sam?
As I mentioned in my budget presentation earlier, we have a $1.3 million working cash transfer resolution that we're asking the board to approve tonight. This was part of our original budget planning for the building projects. We've just not asked the board to make the transfer until now, since we're at the end of our projects and we'll be ending up paying the rest of our bills for the high school this year. This is the time to do that. So it's just stating that we're taking $1.3 million from working cash and putting that into our Fund 60 construction account.
Thank you. Any questions? Allison?
Griffey?
Aye.
Bastian? Samantha?
Aye.
Yes.
Phelps?
Aye.
Rodriguez? Aye.
Okay. Next on the agenda, consider approval of the fiscal year 22 budget for District 205. Any motion?
So moved.
Second.
Sam?
Does anyone have any questions regarding the budget?
You had a presentation earlier.
We did.
It's the same budget, right?
We did, it is, yes.
It's been a while.
Very proud of you, good job. We love that cash on hand.
Yes.
I
Allison?
still believe that one document in the end that talks about fundraising is that we declare what funds have been raised by entities within the district over $1,000 is not correct. It lists one item that was raised this past year. Even in this year of pandemic, I would wager that more than one entity has raised more than $1,000.
I don't think so, we didn't have.
Fundraisers.
We didn't have any
Well,
fundraisers.
these camps, people still went to these things last summer. How are those funded?
I don't know when people did go to camps last time.
But camps, like, when like the football team has a camp,
So we're just talking about, yes.
football, basketball,
Yeah.
volleyball have camps, but I don't think it's on this budget.
It'd be on this next budget.
All right.
This is part of the new, it's part of the new, it's part of the new fiscal year.
Okay.
Allison?
Bastian? Aye. Samantha?
Aye.
Yes.
Phelps?
Yes.
Rodriguez? Aye. Griffey?
Aye. Next item, consider approval of the FY 22 budget for GABC.
So moved.
Second. Any questions?
Allison?
Samantha?
Aye.
Ryan?
Yes.
Phelps?
Aye.
Rodriguez? Aye. Griffey?
Aye.
Bastian? Aye.
Consider approval of student activity passes for the 2021-2022 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Sam?
Okay, I'm
It's
gonna.
me again, all right.
Back
Back at it. Hello, yeah, we're good. So one of the things that we try to do as a district is eliminate fees, and all of those expenditures moving forward. Well, one of them that has come up again is students paying to get into games. If you remember a couple years ago, we had a hologram sticker that kids could purchase, put on their student ID, and that's how they would get into the games. Well, Mrs. Ham and I and Dr. Aspen talked about this a couple different ways, and what we have come up with is to eliminate any fee at all. So what we are proposing is, we're gonna send out some information through NB Pickerel, and parents can sign up if they choose to get a student activity pass. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. You'll fill out a form, name, address, and all that information. We will create a card for you. It'll have your student's name, picture, school, and the year on it. And then we'll have some rules on the back that you need to follow. Got to follow the COVID protocol. Must accompany an adult to a game, so we're not just being babysitters for people. So we're gonna have to have people kind of change their philosophy on thinking about coming to things. But it's free, it doesn't cost them anything. They just sign up for them. We will make them in the athletic department, and we will send them out to the parents. But they have to sign up for it. If they don't sign up for it, they would have to pay when they come to the game. So they have the option to get a free activity pass. K through 8 would get these passes. High school kids, we're gonna treat them like adults, they better have their ID on when they come to the game anyway. So as long as they have their student ID, they'd be able to get into the game, and that's normal. Otherwise, they have to pay to get in. So K through 8 would have, we'll call it a student activity pass that they would have. Mom and dad can keep it, they would come to the game, show the pass, they just get in for free. Junior high students, they like to stay after games, after school to go to the games. They wouldn't need to have that to go to a junior high event if they're already there. They would just be able to go to it. But if they're gonna come to a high school event, they're gonna have to have their ID, their student activity pass to get into the event for free.
And also,
And an adult supervised, so you're just not,
An adult doesn't mean per child. For example, one person may bring their child and 3 of his buddies with it, correct?
correct, they were responsible for it.
There has to be an adult
yes,
with a group.
correct.
Plus,
So,
it also makes it easier for the ticket takers, because then they're not trying to decide, are you a bowling kid or, no,
Right.
if you don't have the pass, you owe me money, and, it's just.
we were trying to, we had a week 1 football game, we're not in school, kids don't have passes, so we were trying to figure, we charged, because we didn't know any other way that we could get kids in and not know who was where and get them in, so we just charged. So we're just trying to set some parameters moving forward we're giving them the option that they don't have to pay to get in. We will give you a free card to come to the athletic event.
So how much money do we leave on the table with this?
I have no idea.
Well, the board voted in 2019 to eliminate all activity fees.
I mean, we don't charge for anything.
So that included getting into games.
Yeah.
And we still had money in our bank.
So the adults showing up, we still sell.
We still sell all sports passes, basketball passes, and we're still selling those. Yes.
Yeah.
Just for the students.
Now, how does that affect something like a drama presentation?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. This is for all extracurriculars.
We didn't set this up, right? No.
No, you did. No, we don't talk. No. I see you I see you once a month. This is it. But I did see you at the stadium one time. I've been here almost 4 years. I saw you there once. And I asked you, are you lost? And we joked and you laughed and then you went on. So, okay, so I see you once a month here. So, no, this is not set up. All extracurriculars. So if you come to the play, you come to the musical. If you have your card, you will be able to get in for free. All extracurriculars.
So you're gonna put this out on Skyward and.
Amy will take care of it.
We're gonna use our communication specialist back there, Amy Pickerel. She's gonna get all that out.
All right.
Yes.
The only exception, let's talk about basketball, because basketball is a little bit different animal.
Okay, I don't remember. Okay.
Like especially, because the seat capacity that you.
Oh, yeah, so some events, like when we play Rocky home, we'll have to watch our count of how many kids that we'll be able to have in. So if we need to cut it out, when we get the gym back, we'll be able to count up seats, which I know normally how we have, and then we just kind of monitor that area so that we're not over exceeding it, so.
And Eric will set a number and we'll give that communication out, like for the Rock Island game, there's gonna be 150 student seats available with activity passes. And then after that point, then everyone's charged.
There's a section there for them, so that once it's full, then we're charging.
Any other questions?
It's a work in progress.
That'll be good.
Allison?
Samantha? I'm gonna say I kind of still like the monogram on the ID, but I recognize that not all K through 8 have IDs, so I just don't like the duplication of IDs at grade levels, but
Ryan?
Yes.
Phelps?
Aye.
Rodriguez? Aye.
Aye.
Bastow? Aye.
Let's see. Need consider approval of dual credit agreement with Carl Sandburg College.
So moved.
And Dr. Esper.
Thank you. This is a yearly item that we have to approve if we want to count dual credit classes. So it's an agreement, a formal agreement with Sandburg finding out how we are able to offer classes at the same time now.
Any questions for me?
I just want to point out in our personnel agenda later on, we're approving some, what do you call it? Overloads for 2 staff members who are teaching 2 dual credit classes, 3 dual credit, that's right. One person's doing 2 classes and one's doing 1 at the high school facility for the students in that class and the opportunity to have dual credit. So it's happening and I'm glad it is.
Any more questions? Comments? Allison?
Yes.
Yes.
Rodriguez? Aye. Sharpie?
Aye.
Bestad? Aye. Thomas?
Aye.
Next, consider approval of communication plan for first reading.
Yeah, it's really just the first reading, so we don't even have to move for second.
Okay.
Policy, but just, it's there for your review. I asked Mrs. Pickrell to put that together over the summer. She and I went back and forth on it a number of times. I'm really proud of her and the plan. It's really the district's first formal attempt to kind of lay out a complete plan for communication, especially, you know, at these trying times. It's more important than ever to try to figure out communication. I think she does a great job of striking a balance between hard and fast plans and in case stuff happens plans, because we know that's going to happen too. So we will ask you to approve this on the second reading next month, so please review it over the next month. If you have any questions or whatever, get them to me and Amy, and we'll make revisions as needed.
Sounds good. Any comments, questions?
I'll just say that I am really appreciative that we're actually moving this direction, working for a different entity. And we have clear communication guidelines, right? We, at the entity that I work at, I mean, our communication plan even includes what color purple and gold we can use on the color spectrum. Like if we want it to be associated with our entity, we have guidelines to that. We have guidelines on our font size, on our letterheads. I mean, it is a very specific kind of communication plan because it is a very clean and clear brand. So I am happy to know that we are maybe not moving in that complete direction, but we're moving in a consistent communication direction.
Excellent. Next item, consider approval of a plan for continued instruction and continuity of services.
So moved. Second.
That's Dr. Aspen.
Thank you. So this is a committee that met right before school started, and it was a really, I will say, a very high functioning committee. It had board, it had parents, it had students, it had staff, it had faculty, it had administration, and it was really looking at all the issues surrounding being able to offer a continuum of services throughout the pandemic. And this is, one, it was not only a good idea, and Mrs. Pickrell has it on the website right now for anybody that wants to reference it, but two, it's also required that the board approve this plan, so, or at least a plan, doesn't approve this plan, to approve a plan so that we can formally apply for our ESSER 3 money. So we are asking for your approval for 2 reasons. One, to affirm the committee's work, and 2, so that we can formally apply for federal ESSER dollars. And thank you to members Sherby and Betcher for participating in the committee. I think you would agree it was a very collaborative effort.
Questions? Okay. Allison?
Phelps?
Aye.
Rodriguez? Aye. Sharpie?
Aye.
Bestad? Aye. Thomas?
Aye.
Aye.
Let's see.
Next was just the first reading.
Okay, so we don't need a motion for this.
No, and I'd just like to add, we are very, very fortunate to have Mrs. Bredemeyer doing our evaluation coordination. She's doing a wonderful job. And she has been working with the GEA, who's been fantastic to work with on this, to look at changing our evaluations to fit the actual jobs that people do. You know, we're not just sitting back and just saying, hey, you're gonna get evaluated. We're actually thinking about what's on the evaluations. And so I commend Mrs. Bredemeyer and the Para Joint Committee for getting together and actually looking at some changes. So it's basically some rubric changes depending on jobs. We've got new jobs, we've reevaluated jobs, and so this is trying to make those evaluations actually mirror the jobs. So looking at this over the next month, we would ask for your formal approval.
Sounds good. Any questions?
Does this become part of the teacher contract then, because it currently?
Yes, it does, because it gets a direct reference, so it's not necessarily attached to the teacher's contract. However, it makes direct reference to the Para Joint Committee work that by law has to meet every year. So this committee's actually doing work, whereas I can say I know other districts, they don't necessarily, they just get together and rubber stamp things. So this committee actually does work.
Okay. We'll move on to the next one. Consider approval of job descriptions.
Second.
Yep.
You have in front of you some revised job descriptions. Obviously, since we're moving into GHS very shortly here, we needed to make some changes to our custodial staff job descriptions. The first sheet is the general job description that goes along with every position. And then the very long document that you have after that basically identifies the responsibilities and cleaning zones for our custodial staff. We also made some adjustments to the custodial start and end times at our K-8 facilities. Last year, we had done some overlapping times with first and second shift to address some of those COVID needs when we first got back to school, but we're able to return to more normal operations at this point. So that's what you have in front of you tonight, those revised job descriptions.
And I would like to add too, because Mrs. Ham and Mr. Spring and the members of the custodial staff need to be thanked for the amount of work that they put into this. So we had to wait until the very last minute really to get this done because we didn't know what the building was necessarily. We knew what Brian told us, and we kind of in concept knew what it was. But until we actually got inside it and looked at it, it was really not possible to figure out. And the custodial staff has been super fantastic to work with, and really a collaborative effort to put together these job descriptions. We went basically. I'm going to say his name because he doesn't get enough credit. Mike Westfall basically wrote a lot of these because he's been at the high school for many, many years, and we basically turned to him and went, "What do you think, Mike?" And so he said, "Oh, good idea." And we just write that down. So I mean, really, it was really could have been a very difficult process, but was not because of the people that invested the time to get it done.
See, Allison?
Ruby?
Aye.
Estab?
Aye.
Sorrentos?
Aye.
Lyon? Phelps?
Aye.
Rios?
Aye.
Okay, next up, consider approval of personnel report.
So moved.
Second.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, Allison?
Estab?
Aye.
Sorrentos?
Aye.
Lyon?
Yes.
Phelps?
Yes.
Rios?
Aye.
Ruby?
Aye. And grievance update.
So I had a very productive meeting with the GEA last week. It is on me to reply back to them. They've been very kind to me as I had a lot of stuff on my plate. They allowed me to extend the timeline. So while I'm not in a position to promise that they've been resolved, I believe we're well on our way to having them resolved. And I feel like we're mutually problem solving. And I think those will be put behind us pretty quickly.
Okay. About a report on the FOIA request.
Thank you. So the SEIU Local 73 sent us a FOIA request for a listing of employees on record. Step Steel LLC sent us a FOIA on satellite equipment on external surfaces managed or owned by District 205, because who doesn't want to know that? AP courses and subgroup enrollment was asked for, as was demographic information, pre-introduced race smart information for Smart Procure for purchase orders and all details from 3/25 to current. So we put together lots and lots and lots of hours, we have no idea why. Smart Procure, they ask for a lot of stuff, like, I think there should be a law that they can't ask for things. Because they have a lot of time we put in, and we never see any benefit for it, so I'm not really sure why. But those are the ones from this month, it was a lot of stuff.
Okay, well, that wraps up just about everything. We have comments by Board of Education. Start all the way to my right with Member Pesta.
I have nothing.
Excellent.
I just want to, I do want to thank all of the work, all of the people who put work into the move over the weekend, making sure that we can get into the high school next week. I know that it is extremely easy to get onto social media and bash District 205 and claim that we don't care sitting at this table, but we wouldn't have been going through everything that we have actually been going through for the past few years if that wasn't our number one concern. So for those of you who have been patient with us and understanding and who do believe that your students' best interests are our focus, I appreciate your support. Thank you.
I just want to say to the parents that came and talked this morning that are just as frustrated as us with the health department, because we are changing every day, or they're changing every day, and what we say to them is something completely different from what they said to us yesterday. So please bear with us. We're trying very hard to be on the same page as them. Another thing, we talked about building reports at our retreat. Can we kind of change those a little bit? I know the guy that we had came and talked to us and he said something that 3 positives, 2 improvements, and 1 goal.
Right.
And that really stuck with me. I really liked that. I know it's really hard to say what's not going well in your buildings, but we don't know what's going on in your buildings. We don't know what isn't going well. We just always see the positives, which is awesome, but we know not everything is positive. So please let us know something that you need to improve, or a goal that you want to work on that you need to work on.
And now that the board goals are there, next month they will change towards that.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's all I got.
So let's go all the way down to Member Phelps.
I have nothing.
I'm sure Morgan is.
Start the timer, okay? No, board reports this time was good, wonderful to hear the students are in the schools. I mean, I'm just so excited. Those kids who haven't seen school for 2 weeks in a row, or have seen it already. Keep it up. There was discussion regarding the memorials at Nielsen, but I also see, like, when I was at Steele the other day, there's one right next to the sign commemorating a garden. I mean, so we need to keep track of those things. I know you had a plan to bring to us at some point to address that. Probably it's time to get to that. And the last, in the pictures that we looked at of the 712 campus, a building that we didn't show this time, which I'm going to be reactive here to a comment that I got earlier that we only care about athletics, is we didn't show the progress in the performing arts centers. And it's the area behind the wall. I mean, for someone to tell us that we don't care about that area is rather rude and inappropriate, because we're putting up a facility there that's going to be acoustically correct. It's going to have good sight lines. It's going to work well for performances. I just challenge the people that do the fine arts in our community to use it more than 1 or 2 or 3 times a year, because it has to justify it. And then the other side of that wall, we're building a new band and chorus rooms that will hopefully fit the increased size of those programs as they grow and give more opportunities for our children in the fine arts. So when you say all we care about is sports, is inappropriate. We do care, we care about all the children, and we care what they're doing. And I shouldn't be defensive, but I sure am about that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I just have one thing. I think I'd like to take a moment to recognize former 205 administrator, Mrs. Ann Gegenbacher. She passed away on August 12th, and she was a 35-year employee of 205. She started as a 5th grade teacher at Allen Park West, taught at King, administrator at Churchill, and she was an administrator for my children at Silas. She was a lovely lady, and I'm sure she'll be missed by her family, those in her. Let's see, next, future agenda items. Anybody?
We set those goals.
Now we're gonna have a plan, we're going to.
The administrator need to meet now to put together a plan for communicating progress on those goals to you in a rational manner. We won't have data points every month, we can have some indicators every month, and then we can have a plan set up where buildings can come and present for how they're approaching those goals, we can do that on a very cyclical manner.
Yeah.
Now that we have the goals in place, we can start setting up those schedules, so this gives us a great opportunity to move that forward and have those presentations every month that will be brief, but they will be able to have that time to be able to talk about what they're doing.
Okay, last item, a future meeting is Monday, October 11th at 7 p.m. Thank you for everybody that stayed here and listened to us, and to everybody watching us online. Meeting adjourned. Oh, I need a motion.
All motion.
Aye.